Dr. Hill, I'm going to go ahead and get started.
Yes, ma'am.
Carl, we're on. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Charles County Board of Education work session for Monday, April 26, 2021. I now call the meeting to order. Please stand and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all. Mr. Schwartz.
First matter is public forum. I will read the rules for public forum. Speakers should identify themselves. Statements should be brief, to the point, and limited to 3 minutes or less. Board members should not be expected to respond during the forum to statements made by speakers. Statements should relate to Charles County Board of Education agenda items or any education-related topic with the following limitations: personnel matters, pending or potential appeals, or the comments regarding the actions or statements of individual staff or the private lives of any individual are not appropriate topics. Proper language and decorum are required at all times. We have several speakers here in person and several speakers we will be doing virtually. Our first speaker is in person, Angel Lord. Not here. Our next speaker is Yolanda Coleman Brown.
Good evening. My name is Yolanda Coleman Brown. I'm a parent of twin boys at Matthew Henson and a daughter, 11th grader at North Point. My first concern is seniors' experience. I'm concerned about the disconnection between Steetham and the home-based schools. Though I'm grateful, and this is my nephew I'm speaking of, was able to participate, he was also excluded from home-based information his junior year. Since he's only at Lackey for 7th and 8th periods, these are some of the solutions that we talked about. The schools need to know each other. The staff made it clear they are separate. Develop more schools to have CTE programs like North Point in their buildings. Move homeroom to the end of the day or before 7th period when all juniors are in the building. The junior year is one of the most important years. Acknowledge the Steetham students at their home-based graduations, especially since it's like segregated honor programs. And then the next thing is revise who can attend North Point. Neither of my nephews, they're 4.0 students. One was very interested in going into the culinary program, but he was not accepted. He talked to one of his fellow classmates, and they were in it just to do something. So he feels he's established a bakery, he cooks daily, he writes about it, and he wants to own his own restaurant. So he was very disappointed in not being accepted into the culinary program. He is in the ProStar program, which we hope will work and veer him still into the culinary. My next concern is, what is their plan to recruit more teachers of color? Our school district is mostly people of color. However, our teaching staff does not reflect our student population. What is the plan to improve our social studies curriculum in its current form and stop leaving it to the imagination, particularly in elementary schools where they are teaching second graders cost benefits and cost opportunity and using examples the children cannot relate to, such as houses and jet skis. And the next thing is I want to know about the COVID safety in the schools. How exactly are you all handling the letters of the younger students? I know we're starting at 16, but how are we handling it with the younger ones? Because it seems there's a big outbreak amongst the younger children. And my next concern is I come to these meetings and we need to see results. We need to be transparent. And
Can you finalize your comments, please? Thank you.
to be, instead of just being heard, we want to be seen and heard, and we want a response from you all while we're here in some type of platform. I know we can come to that, to find a place where we can sit and we can discuss a town hall meeting at every high school or something, but our children need to feel more that they're cared, education-wise and by the board and their schools.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Eric Valentine. We will come back to Mr. Valentine. Next speaker is Desmond Rowe.
Good evening, board members and Charles County residents. My name is Desmond Rowe. I am here today not only as the Charles County NAACP Youth President, but I am also here as a student. Being the president of the Charles County NAACP Youth Council is an extreme honor, one that I am proud to hold. As youth president, it is my job to make sure youth are treated fairly and receive equal opportunity throughout our county. And as much as I love my county, I hate to say this, but equal opportunity does not come to us all. Luckily, I am not a product of misfortune with the SRO program here in Charles County. But as a student, I have seen who has been affected more negatively than positive. It's time that we flip this negative connotation of our SROs and police officers in our community. And the way to do that is here today with your community with communication. Why is it we have SROs in our buildings anyway? The answer is simple: to keep students safe. Whether it's an outside threat or inside threat, our SROs are in these buildings to keep us safe. But the question I do not understand is, why is the number one priority on the MOU to enforce the law? So you're telling me that these officers are in these schools to enforce laws on students. Forget enforcing the law. That is not the reason why we have That is the reason why I have community members here today and on the Zoom who does not like this program at all. We all say, stop arresting the students and give them guidance. And people with bigoted remarks respond with, it's not a police officer's job to guide. Well, thank you. I know that. But if the Charles County Sheriff's Office has their officers in our schools, then their number one priority should be to work with the students and guide the students, not enforce law upon the students. You, the board, should want that also. Us, the students, to be more positively affected by our SROs rather than punished. It is absolutely ridiculous that the Board of Education did not promote this public forum enough with their community. Communication with their community is extremely poor, and we want communication. We are here because we care, and we want to be involved. So we are asking you to please involve us. As a board, it feels like there is no care for our police. You are elected officials. You are elected by us, the community, and I'm asking you, the Charles County Board of Education, along with the Charles County Sheriff's Office, to work with me and the Charles County NAACP in reconstructing this MOU. Let's make Charles County the leading county in Maryland. It is time for our elected officials to make this change. Thank you.
Next speaker is Darta Sweat.
Good evening, everyone. Board members, Superintendent Hill, Mr. Ian Hurd. It's a pleasure to be here to see everyone in person. I am here to lend support to our Youth Council in support of the MOU to make sure that the school system and our law enforcement agency works together with the community to make sure that our children are safe in the school, but not over-policed, as we see in data and statistics that show us that our black and brown students are being arrested or being mishandled by our SROs a little more than they should be. So we're asking to have a community involved and to make sure that this MOU does not look like a law enforcement document, but a policy that is here to help make sure that our children are safe within the school system. I am also here to ask again from Dr. Hill, when I spoke to Dr. Hill in February of last year, to right a wrong that happened in this school system in 1969. Did speak with one of our students that was involved today, and as of today, there has not been a plan articulated to them to right the wrong and making sure that those students finally receive their high school diplomas from 1969. My last thing that I would like to address the board is, in 2019, there were 2 equity task forces that were formed. The NAACP's responsibility in any area is to advocate for education, a free, high-quality education for all. In that requirement, it speaks to us to advocate for increased resources and equity, ensure students are college and career ready, improve teaching and its staff, and to improve discipline, keep our kids in the school system. On April 21st, this school board, along with Dr. Hill, implemented and adopted policy 1820, educational equity, and is the principle of inclusion and fairness. As the president of the Charles County NAACP, we were not invited to be at that table to advocate on behalf of our Black and brown students. And we are asking for a seat at that table. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Eric Valentine.
Board members, Dr. Hill, good evening. My name is Eric Valentine, and I am the La Plata High School Student Liaison. On March 29th, the Board of Education held a school resource officer town hall to discuss the program and hear from members of the community. I'm appreciative for the opportunity for interested students to make their voice heard on this important issue. I'm also glad that we have reconvened tonight to seriously discuss ways to improve our MOU with the Charles County Sheriff's Office and better include the community in this program. I would like to make one thing immediately clear. Student leaders have not come here today to entirely dismantle the SRO program, and I think our testimony is proof of just that. We want to work collaboratively to empower this program to better serve every student in Charles County and more accurately reflect their needs. This program is an important piece of the school community, but unfortunately, discrepancies within the program hinder its effectiveness countywide. La Plata is very fortunate to have a well-qualified SRO, as they played an integral part of investigating 2 separate incidents with guns in 2019 and reassuring students of their safety. One concern, however, that has been shared by many students is access to our SROs. Time and time again, I've heard students say they are unfamiliar with their SRO or do not know how to get in contact with them. Our survey did not collect any data directly regarding this topic. Currently, I don't have the necessary information to reach out to our SRO, and that is the case for some students at La Plata High School and many more across Charles County. Now, I know that I could find my SRO's email, but there are some students that would not even know where to look. I would implore the board to find a way to make sure this program is serving its purpose as a resource to all students. Thank you. Enjoy your evening.
That was our last in-person speaker, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Mackey.
Our first speaker for this evening for the virtual public forum is Michael Rose. Mr. Rose, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself and turn your camera on, please.
I'm so sorry, I'm just having some technical issues. If it's possible, maybe to start with the next speaker and then come back to me?
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So our next speaker is Angus, Chile, McKenzie. If you could go ahead and enable your controls, please. Perfect.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Angus Chile McKenzie, and I'm the Director of Southern Marylanders for Racial Equality. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person with you today. But first, I'd like to state that the discussion on SROs could simply amount to putting a Band-Aid on a larger issue within our school system and our county as a whole. And I want to warn the school board not to get comfortable saying, there, we fixed it, after a few small, unenforceable or inconsequential concessions on this MOU, because this program has harmed several of our children and their families. We are still advocating in favor of using civilian staff for behavior support. However, we have signed on to the document submitted by the coalition of several groups who are invested in this work and have researched the data, but are also involved directly with these children and families. I hope you will dive deep into our specific recommendations for this MOU when you read it, and it was sent today. But I'll highlight the following. In paragraph 13.2 of this memorandum of understanding, it states that arrest by an SRO should be a, quote, last resort. But we find that is not always the case in practice with SROs. They routinely make arrests for low-level offenses, often despite the fact that the violation that the student committed may be developmentally or disability related. And despite the fact that the school code of conduct may call for detention, suspension, or referral for services, we see that they are being arrested instead. We would like to use the language of COMAR that prohibits restraining students except in the case of imminent, serious physical harm after other less intrusive non-physical interventions have failed or been deemed inappropriate. Number two, we have seen multiple cases in which SROs have appealed the decisions of the Department of Juvenile Services after charges have been dropped against the student. We would like the language in the MOU that mandates SROs defer to the decisions of GJS as they have more expertise in what action is appropriate regarding children. This will prohibit them from appealing case after case. Number three, we would like a formal complaint process for students and parents to report misconduct by SROs. This information should be made available to the sheriff's office as well as the school board. We also want at least a yearly review and tracking for racial and disability-based biases with regards to arrests and ensure that these troubling patterns can be eliminated. And finally, we would like teachers and administrators to receive training on methods of supporting positive student behavior and the roles and responsibilities of SROs if they will remain. This will help ensure that the school itself is not relying on SROs inappropriately as a substitute for classroom management. With these changes and the others that will be mentioned, it will be a first step, at least, in the process of focusing on external or internal threats to the student body and securing the school building instead of criminalizing children. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker this evening is Diane Alcoot. If you could go ahead and turn your camera on and enable your audio, please.
Good afternoon, board members and Dr. Hill. My name is Zion Offit. I'm a ninth grader at Thomastown High School. I'm here today to speak on some things that happened when I was at Mattawoman Middle School. I'm hoping that what I say today can help improve our school system so that our SROs can be hoped and used for all students. When I was in 7th grade, I battled depression and suicidal thoughts. That year, I worked with my IEP facilitator to work on ways I could better my education and a school psychologist to work on ways I can cope with crisis and anger. One day I had a reading mediation with the principal, psychologist, and the IEP facilitator, and they were worried that I was in self-harm. They called the resource officer. After he talked to me, he also agreed I was in self-harm. So he put me in handcuffs, and during PBIS time, at least 10 other students saw me escorting by the resource officer in handcuffs. When I got back to school the next week, students kept asking, what happened to Zion? I kept saying I didn't want to talk about it, but after a while, the entire school knew about it. That was humiliating and overwhelming. Another time I was in class, I was asking to see my IEP facilitator. The teacher kept saying, you can't see her at this time. I was so overwhelmed, I walked out of the classroom and I went to my IEP facilitator. When I got back to the class, there was an administrator looking for me. So they called the SRO because they were afraid I was in harm with the teacher. That led me in handcuffs once again and escorted me to the office when I met my father, who took me out. I know I had my challenges, but as I've grown and matured, I see things from a new perspective. Now I am a member of SGA and Honor Roll. Reflecting on my interactions with an SRO, I believe that the SROs should not be called dealing with children with mental health crisis because they escorted the situation. If we were to have a crisis team for situations like these situations would have never extended to where I was placed in handcuffs. When SROs are responding to situations like mine, they should prohibit to decline. The SRO program should be resource first, officer second. Thank you.
Thank you, Zion. Is Mr. Gross available? Michael Gross, are you ready to provide comments?
I am ready. It's actually Michal Gross. Hi.
I'm so sorry, I apologize.
That's okay. That's absolutely fine. So my name is Michal Gross, and I am an assistant public defender with the Maryland Office of the Public Defender here in Charles County. I've been there for the past 6 years, and I primarily represent youth and adolescents who are charged in both juvenile and in adult court. I don't have, in speaking to the school board, I don't have to really go into the statistics. I would hope that every member of the school board knows that school police disproportionately impact Black students and students with disabilities. For instance, in the 2018-2019 school year, Black students received 87% of school-based arrests in Charles County, despite representing only 55% of the student population. 92% of the school-based arrests that year were non-white students, and most of these arrests are for minor offenses. The Charles County Public School, and specifically the board, is responsible to make sure that that changes. And because the memorandum of understanding is on today's agenda, I would ask the board to look carefully at the memorandum, and I actually have 3 additional suggestions for improvement, adding on to what Angus testified about earlier tonight. The 3 areas I would ask the board to focus on are placement, access, and ensuring students' rights are protected. When I talk about placement, what I'm talking about is where are we putting school resource officers? If they are at schools, they should not be in elementary schools. And if they are at high schools and middle schools, they should remain outside of high schools and middle schools. They shouldn't be roaming the hallways. They shouldn't be inside the school buildings arresting kids. I know Zion just spoke about her experience with the school resource officer handcuffing her in the middle of the school. That should not be happening. The second area that I was focusing on was the access. Reading through this memorandum of understanding, school resource officers in Charles County have essentially unlimited access to the school building. They have access to the school radio. They have fobs that give them access to all the hallways in the school building. What ends up happening is that they witness normal adolescent behavior, and as law enforcement officers, they interpret it as a crime. And that needs to be limited by the school board. I've seen, for example, kids throwing food in a cafeteria, leading to assault charges. A kid punching a wall out of frustration, leading to malicious destruction of property charges. These are normal adolescent reactions to a frustrating situation or normal behavior that kids engage in every single day. When you put a police officer there witnessing this behavior, they're witnessing a crime. In addition, when I talk about access, there is some concern about the school resource officers having access to student records. And this is really discussed a lot further in the letter that the Office of the Public Defender and other organizations submitted to the board earlier today. The third thing I said I was going to cover was ensuring student rights are protected. Specifically, my concern is about interrogation and about school resource officers' recommendations when it comes to school discipline issues. Yes. Absolutely. I would ask the memorandum of understanding to really focus, when rewriting this, to focus on students' rights during interrogations and make sure that those are actually protected, and to keep school resource officer and any law enforcement out of school disciplinary decisions. To end, I would say that the Charles County Board of Education has a responsibility to protect all kids, including those who are most vulnerable. The statistics that I've offered and the anecdotal stories show that that's not happening right now. And instead, those students who are most vulnerable are being targeted by the school resource officers. If they're going to be in school buildings, armed law enforcement officers, they should be protecting and not harming students. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker this evening is Ryan Brown.
Good evening. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to speak today. I know COVID has created a plethora of issues within our school system, so I appreciate you all exploring alternative options to the typical public forum. My name is Ryan Brown. I'm a senior at St. Charles High School, and I've been a student in CCPS since 2008. This year, I am serving as a student liaison from St. Charles and hold other positions within student government, which greatly involve me with students and staff alike. Today, I'd like to present a student perspective, at least that from St. Charles, on the CCSO memorandum. In early 2019, during my sophomore year at St. Charles, our school resource officer, Corporal Patrick Mann, unexpectedly passed away. It was a shock to our entire community in ways I cannot explain. I remember coming into school the day everyone found out. You heard his name being whispered between students. Teachers were wondering if they'd even had the details right. There was an air of confusion amongst everyone at St. Charles, and the day of Corporal Mann's funeral only solidified it. Closing St. Charles on the day of his funeral was talked about, but ultimately foregone in order to appropriately support students and staff who needed it. On Friday, February 8th, the day of his funeral, the majority of staff and students were gone. My classes had about half of the usual attendance, and every one of my teachers were out. Teachers from other schools and people working at the administrative buildings came and covered our classes. You could tell our community was hurting. The halls were quiet, and basically every class started with all the students telling their stories of the time they spent with Officer Mann. Officer Mann wasn't just a figurehead put into our school to enforce the law first and foremost. Officer Mann was a vital part of our community because of relationships he formed with staff and students. He attended all the sporting events, painted the field for football games, participated in pep rallies, was friendly with everyone at our school, and truly was the student body's resource. Of course, his office was cleared out and redone for his replacement, but in the hearts and minds of St. Charles students and staff, he is irreplaceable. As I'm sure you're aware, my experience with SROs at St. Charles has been the ideal one. Corporal Mann wasn't the officer we see in the media every day. He wasn't the officer who used de-escalation tactics that only heightened the situation. Corporal Mann was the ideal SRO. The image he put out while serving at St. Charles only brought positive attention and relationships. The dynamic the St. Charles community had with our late SRO should be the one that CCPS aims to achieve in every one of our schools. SROs should build constructive relationship with their schools. They should be a last resort in applicable situations, but always be available to mentor, educate, and serve students in a pragmatic fashion. I urge you today to reconsider how the expectations of the memorandum are carried out within our schools. The principled experience I had with the SRO program isn't shared by every CCPS student, and it's your responsibility in coordination with CCSO to ensure that moving forward, it is. SROs have the potential to be positive role models and change the lives of my peers for the better, but they are in desperate need of a rebranding to ensure that every SRO in our county is the ideal one. Once again, thank you all for allowing me to speak here today and giving the student voice a platform.
Okay, thank you. Next on our agenda, we have the charter school application. I believe, Dr. Hill, you are up.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. In mid-December of last year, the board received an application to open the Phoenix International School of the Arts, or PISATA, public charter school in Charles County. The application was filed by Ms. Angelica Jackson on behalf of the founding group of the Phoenix International School of the Arts. As superintendent of schools, my recommendation to the board is that you approve this application under the condition that the Phoenix International School of the Arts be limited initially to grades 6 through 8. I recognize and appreciate the many hours of work that was invested in developing the PISATA Charter School proposal, and I'm sure you'll see during their presentation, Ms. Jackson and her team are clearly enthusiastic, well-prepared, and committed to children. The PISATA team has proposed operating a school for grades 6 and 7 in the 2022-2023 school year for about 125 students. The school would then grow by one grade level each year until it serves 700 students through 12th grade. My recommendation supports a middle school only or grades 6 through 8 approval at this time. If the board approves the recommendation to move forward, the next step in the process is for the board and Posada to formalize in a charter agreement the contract between the board and Posada. The charter or contract would set out the legal requirements, expectations, conditions, and deadlines for the school's operations. The board's approval of this application would be contingent on both sides of the charter agreeing to the conditions of the charter and then signing that agreement. The recommendation to move forward with the Phoenix International School of the Arts is the first such recommendation for opening a public charter school in Charles County. At this time, Ms. Wilson, I invite Ms. Jackson and her team to provide information to the board regarding the Phoenix International School of the Arts.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hill. Good evening, Charles County Public Schools Board of Education. If you see me glance down, I'm just looking at my notes, but I am here with you all this evening. My name is Angelica Jackson, and I am the Intended Executive Director of Phoenix International School of the Arts. I'm joined here by our co-founder, Rickay King. Phoenix International School of the Arts is also known by its acronym PASOTA, so you may have heard Dr. Hill refer to the school as PASOTA. That's the school. Before we formally begin our presentation, on behalf of the Phoenix International team in the back, you can wave, hello. I would like to share our deepest gratitude and appreciation to you, the Board of Education, as well as Dr. Hill and the operations team for deeply understanding our proposal. I'd also like to thank the staff attorney, Mr. Schwartz, who's been the primary liaison between our team and the central office team. And most importantly, I want to just thank all of our family and friends who have joined us this evening, parents, local educators, advisors, and community members here in person and on Zoom, and watching YouTube. Thank you for joining us. Everyone's contributions to the development of Phoenix International School of the Arts, whether it's sharing about the school, participating in our pilot program, student leadership program, giving critical feedback about the school has been invaluable. But to start us off, to provide a brief overview of Phoenix International School of the Arts, we have prepared a short video. After the video plays, I will move forward through the program. I'll get to our agenda directly after. I have about 30 minutes with you all today, so I'll be speaking rather quickly. So in the video, you'll hear the voices of a Charles County parent. You'll hear the voice of a fourth grade Charles County student who participated in our pilot program. And you'll also hear from myself, Rickay, as well as our intended board chair, Natasha Odell Archer, and we're going to narrate on the school's design. So, okay, I'm having some trouble with the clicker. Yes. I did flick it up. It's not working. Thank you, but we can move to the video. Thank you.
Innovation, global scholarship, and the arts. The true meaning of PASOTA is really creating a lifelong opportunity for learners and setting the stage for the next generation of artists, scholars, innovators, and leaders.
You know, oftentimes when it comes to especially Black and Brown communities, it's not that the talent is not there, it's just they don't have the actual spaces to do these aspects, or no one has put the work in to ensure these spaces are set up for this particular group of people.
What makes that area in Southern Maryland very unique is that there's also a large rural population. I know firsthand because I graduated from McDonough High School in Charles County, Maryland.
I am from Charles County, returned as an adult with over 10 years of experience in arts education and in nonprofit management.
The combined histories of the various change makers who have come together to launch this school accumulates to over 90 years of experience around the world. There really is a population that we are focused on in need and often in crises. We are creating a holistic approach to learning for students. So it's not just your run-of-the-mill academic structure, but it also includes social, emotional learning, as well as creating a holistic environment to embrace the whole child.
We want to make sure that the students are practicing therapy, understanding what yoga is, understanding what mindfulness is, understanding how they can regulate all of their emotions. So if we have your youth or your child set up for therapy, we want to make sure we extend that out to your family as well.
Our second key pillar is our commitment to global competence, global leadership, and bilingualism. As an international school, we deploy several supports so that students can graduate knowing fluently more than one language, as well as ensuring that they have the skills to be global leaders.
In addition to that, we want to make sure they have an opportunity to study abroad, getting their first passport, welcoming them and their family up to the international education space to ensure that by the time they actually leave our space, they have a worldview that's more than just their community, just their neighborhood.
And we know, as the leaders of PSOTA, that creating an experience that embraces community and utilizes the community to help support a student is paramount to their growth as a global citizen in society.
What's really cool about Phoenix International School of the Arts is that we offer a differentiated teaching model. It's project-based. Currently in Charles County, no one school across the district has a keen focus on project-based learning or arts integration, and research has shown that when kids are able to really research and get hands-on and have their own input into what they're learning through projects, through research, through getting involved in the community, they are able to grasp the information and develop a deeper understanding of the content that they're learning.
Arts integration is really game-changing for some students, particularly those that don't learn in traditional ways. So often what's happening is they're then bringing in music or video or movement to help the students really understand the lesson.
We want to ensure that they have creative ways to engage in education where they are currently not being met.
So when we think about the future of work for our world and for our students who we hope to be global citizens, we all know more than ever now, after living through a year of virtual school at home, technology, innovation, and thinking outside of the box will really be key. Our workforce has learned to function in non-traditional ways. We will need the future workforce to be able to do that in a way we have done now and in ways that far surpass what we've done in just this last year alone.
I think parents like me are ready for a school like PSOTA because there is no other school like it in Charles County.
If you are familiar with the Phoenix, it is a mystical bird that represents regeneration, resilience, courage. Those characteristics describe the students who come to Phoenix International School of the Arts. And they describe our community. We are a resilient community, we're a resilient people, and just like the Phoenix, we hope that our school will help students to reach beyond their zip code, reach beyond their circumstances, and to achieve their greatest potential. For your time with watching that video. So we'll move forward in the presentation. Yeah, and the clicker works, awesome. So we are going to quickly move through our agenda. I'll do a brief introduction of our team. I'll talk a bit about the need and demand and how we assess the need and demand for a school like Phoenix International School of the Arts in our community. Then we'll move forward to what our educational plan is, our pedagogical vision. And then I'll move to our road to opening. What is our plan to get to this 2022-2023 school year when we open our doors to students? So this is our team. Establishing the first public charter school in Charles County is both an honor and a challenge, but we are eager and ready to accept it. Our team of founders, advisors, trustees, and innovative liaisons have all worked together to bring change and inspiration to accelerate academic achievement in our community. And as leaders, we are committed to bringing the district, community, parents and guardians, and of course the students all together through creative expression, real-world application, and international vision. We have awesome sponsors and supporters and allies, including the Maryland Alliance of Public Charter School, which is the singular public charter school advocacy organization in the state of Maryland. We were part of their founder group cohort. We were selected out of a pool of applicants to be part of that cohort. And also, we're proud to say that the Maryland State Department of Education is also a supporter of Phoenix International School of the Arts. We were selected to be part of their charter school program grant, where they received funding from federal funding from the Department of Education, and they distribute it to innovative public charter schools in the state of Maryland. And we were selected to receive that funding, should we be approved. And we also have other letters of support by awesome local community organizations that are provided in our charter school application. And then, of course, Charles County Public Schools is and would be a partner with us. As a public charter school, we are part of the free and appropriate public school system. So there's no tuition for Charles County students to attend Phoenix International School of the Arts. Employees, majority of the faculty and staff at Phoenix International School of the Arts would be employees of Charles County Public Schools. And fortunately, even in our application process, we have had the opportunity to work with some of the central office operations team as we develop our proposal. So just to speak in brief again about our overall vision for Phoenix International School of the Arts, as stated, our team has a combined 90+ years of experience in the education space, K-12 education space, and our experience spans over 25 cities and communities and numerous countries overseas. And our collective expertise include curriculum design, arts education, school governance, education policy, business, management, finance, and fundraising, and more. And we're excited to improve the lives of young people through education, through policy and research, through collaboration and professional development, the arts, and public health in our community. So this is a brief overview. Upon opening in fall 2022, Phoenix International School of the Arts projects to enroll 125 students. In our first year, we will serve grades 6 and 7, and then the following year and every year after, we intend to add an additional grade level until our school reaches a seamless 6th through 12th grade model. Seminal research from a study collected through the Schoolhouse Project conveys a compelling perspective that there are benefits to a seamless combination school model where there is a 6th through 12th grade model, or some schools have like a K through 6 or K through 8. And so benefits cited conclude that a combination of grades in one learning community minimizes school transitions, which improves academic achievement. It also minimizes the stressors of middle and high school, from primarily the social stressors from navigating through a new school, meeting new peers, forming new relationships, new teachers. And then also having schools with longer grade spans allow for more collaboration among the teachers from the 6th through 12th grade so that we can ensure alignment and communication while the school advances through their schooling, their secondary schooling. And those are just a few of the benefits. In conversations with parents in our community, they have strongly urged for us to move forward with the 6th through 12 model because they believe with our focus on world language, with our focus on the arts, being in a 6th through 12th grade model will ensure that they receive the access to the opportunities that we intend to have for students as they progress through our high school and then post-secondary. At this time, we intend to open the school by leasing a facility that is centrally located in Charles County, but our goal is to be located in a community that we like to call community at promise within the county. So that way we may provide a pillar of cultural stability, artistic inspiration, community assistance, and an integrated education model to provide the greatest impact. So when we say community at promise, we're thinking areas such as Bryan's Road or Indian Head and some of the more areas that are a bit harder that aren't central to the county, essentially. Fortunately, though, leveraging a public charter school model allows us to serve all students in the county within the grade levels that we serve, as there are no residential zoning limitations to public charter schools. So whether someone is living in Cobb Island or off of 210 in Indian Head, they all would have the opportunity to apply to the school, and if they're in the grades that we serve, they can attend, should there be space. And then these are our key pillars. These key pillars have grounded the design of Phoenix International School of the Arts. So our first key pillar is excellence in A cubed, is what we like to say, which means A cubed stands for academics, excellence in arts instruction. So that's the arts as curriculum, that's our arts conservatory program, as well as arts integration, that project-based learning. Our second key pillar is global competence. And our global curriculum is grounded in the Cambridge International Curriculum. It's the most widely used curriculum in the world and recognized by universities and colleges all over the world. We also, like it was stated in the video, we offer several supports so that students really become fluent in a second language or a third language for our multilingual students. So that means that we offer out-of-school tutoring for those students, and of course, every year from 6th through 12th grade, our students are required to take a world language. Mental health and holistic wellness is our third key pillar. Our focus on building relationships and fostering connections contributes to a sense of belonging and bolsters character development, social emotional learning, academic, and life success. So we intend to implement a variety of practices and tools focused on social emotional learning, community building, restorative practices, trauma healing, mindset development, and identity celebration, just to name a few. And I'll speak, once I get to our curriculum, I'll speak about some of those specific structures that we'll have in place for that. Our fourth key pillar is access to real-world experiences and experts. So a lot of times, just in my experience, personal experience alone, students are graduating high school with internships and with just experience in the workforce, and so that is very important to our school design, that students have access to career exploration while they are in high school, and that they are being taught specifically in our arts conservatory by working folks who are working in that arts discipline. And then our fifth key pillar is community uplift. We want to be the Kennedy Center of Southern Maryland, so to speak. So our goal is to go beyond the classroom and become a magnet for artistic, creative, and enrichment programs. We intend to bring master classes to the community, have a makerspace, music performances in our community, and just really be a beacon for innovation and the arts and global education in Southern Maryland. I'm going to briefly speak to how we assess for the need and demand for a school like ours. So our family and community engagement strategy is driven by research, and lots of it. We gathered information from adults and young people in an effort to gauge the level of interest in a rigorous arts-based school. So we held information sessions. We was able to hold one in person prior to COVID. And in attendance at that particular meeting was Commissioner Thomasina Coates, Maryland Delegate Edith Patterson, and the current president of the Education Association of Charles County, Ms. Linda McLaughlin, was also present during that meeting as well. And we actually received a full page in the Maryland Independent for that particular meeting. And we continue to have those information sessions virtually during the quarantine period. Ultimately, what we learned is that families want to feel that they are part of a close-knit community. They want to be seen, which was mentioned during the public forum earlier today. They value an intentional school-wide integration of the arts, both as curriculum and as an instructional method. And many support arts instruction as an alternative form of math instruction, so including arts integration into those core academic subjects. And so I would typically show a video. There's a video, but just in the essence of time, I will not. But we do have a video of a parent who shared that she currently homeschools her kids, and if PASOTA was to be approved, she would want to bring her kids back into the public school system, and they would apply to enroll at Phoenix International School of the Arts. So I thought that was a very touching, just to have that affirmation, but certainly a very moving point for a homeschool teacher, a homeschool parent, to want to bring her students back into the district. And then continuing forward, we also, to prove demand for the school, we did a digital petition where we had 285 supporters. And we also held a pilot program through a national education program. We received a grant to pilot our school model, which we call Dream Academy. The young lady, the fourth grade student that you saw in the video, she was part of our Dream Academy. And it was just phenomenal. We did it virtually, and we received great feedback from that specific event. We've also had people inquire to work at Phoenix International School of the Arts already. We have a lead form on our website, and we have quite a few people who have applied. And then, of course, community partners. So again, we do have those letters of support by local community partners who are supporting the school. So our school. Our curriculum is research-based and it's expert-driven and proven effective, in short. Our pedagogical practices are internationally minded. The academic core curriculum is internationally minded, and we also have a robust mental health and SEL program. So the Pasoda Academic Foundation is built on the solid practices of design-based instruction and interdisciplinary arts integration. So this means we are using the most innovative, creative techniques for teaching and learning. And I did just want to point out, these are some of the seminal research projects that we refer to in our charter application. The Turnaround Arts Initiative was researching arts integrated teaching practices in Washington, D.C. through the Kennedy Center's education program. And then I did want to highlight the World Economic Forum's Education 4.0 research, and several of the components of that research that guide schools to be schools preparing students for the future. Several of those components are part of our school design. So this information is in our charter application, so I invite you all to dig into that research, and you can, like I like to say, geek out on the research. Is something that I like to do there. And then our curriculum. So we've combed the world for all the best components of an arts curriculum. So that first box there is our curated arts curriculum. You'll see that we offer voice, dance, theater, visual arts, instrumental music, and museum studies, and new media. And so when students come to enroll at Phoenix International School of the Arts, they will choose one of those majors, essentially, those pathways, arts pathways, and continue with that throughout their time at the school. And we've done tours at art schools such as Duke Ellington School of the Arts, Baltimore School for the Arts, Interlochen Arts Academy in Michigan. We've had conversations with the directors at art schools all over the country to curate a program that we propose to the Maryland State Department of Education so that we can work together to develop this arts pathways for students moving through our program. Cambridge International, again, I spoke a little bit about them before. They are the most widely used international curriculum provider in the world. And they offer, we've been fortunate to work with a representative from Cambridge International to ensure that the standards that are listed in Cambridge International match up to the Maryland state standards for middle and high school. And then New View X is a program that is based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, and they will guide our arts integrated teaching model. So they offer a fellow that will come to our school and be the lead educator for arts integration. They will provide the professional development for our faculty, specifically our core academic subjects, to ensure that we are working with fidelity in the creative process for integrating arts integration into those core academic subjects. And then social emotional learning, I want to zone in on CREW, which is one of the practices that we will implement at Phoenix International School of the Arts. CREW is a protocol from EL Education, which is a leading literacy development organization, but they also have a whole school model design that is focused on implementing CREW. And so CREW is essentially like a structured advisory program. However, students will meet with a small group of students and then a CREW leader, so an adult in the building, for their whole 3 years from 6 through 8, and then they'll switch over to a new CREW for 9 through 12. And for CREW, it's a space where they will have these critical conversations about things that are happening in their community, things that are happening within their homes, and whatever they feel comfortable with. And then their CREW is meant to be a place of trust, a place of accountability, so that when students come in, for example, at the beginning of the day, they can say how they're coming into school, what they're feeling, and then their CREW members and the CREW leader can hold them accountable and encourage them and keep them motivated throughout the day. And then as our schedule stands now, we'll also have CREW in the afternoon. And the CREW in the afternoon, it'll be the same group of students, but it will be focused on academics. So it'll be a time for intervention. There will also be a time for homework and things like that. So that's one of the protocols that we have to foster a community of apologies, of a community of voice for our students and our faculty, and just for a safe space for the students. So this is just one protocol that I wanted to call out here. And then when we're thinking about special student populations that are listed here, the primary aspects that I wanted to point out here is that we intend to be collaborative and we intend to implement evidence-based methods informed through historical data, benchmarks, and placement analysis. And we also want to make sure that we are culturally affirming for students and leveraging asset-based language. That's really important for us, that when we're talking about special student populations, that they feel like we are always speaking to their strengths. And so that is a practice that we will implement at Phoenix International School of the Arts. As a public charter school, we are required to work in collaboration with Charles County Public Schools, with the experts here at the district that work with these special student populations to ensure that we are following all of the regulations and protocols that we should. And these are some takeaways. I want to just highlight here that our school is very much aligned to the blueprint for Maryland's future in terms of part of that blueprint in the education space is having high quality teachers and leaders, various college and career readiness pathways, more resources for students at risk, we like to say at promise, and then also innovation in education. And Phoenix International School of the Arts' design is certainly speaks to those four aspects of the blueprint. And then also, if you see in our charter applications on pages 120 through 124, we list out our connections to Charles County Public Schools goals for education. And just to highlight one, provide a safe, orderly, and caring environment for students and staff. That's goal number 2 for Charles County Public Schools. And so I just shared crew, and that was one of our components that aligned to goal number 2. So road to opening, these next few slides are a timeline, and I'm sorry that it's a little hard to read there, but I'll be sure that you all have a copy of our presentation here. But here I just want to, should we receive an approval this evening, we will begin immediately by hiring our planning year staff. So again, we intend to open the school August 2022, so fall 2022. So we'll have about 18 months to, approximately 18 months to plan for that opening. So we will hire our planning year staff. That is our executive director. We'll hire our principal as a consultant, and we'll also hire our director of operations. And then we will, again, start working our principal's primary duty. We'll begin to work on our academic and professional development planning so that that's in place by summer next year. And then we will continue to activate our community engagement plan. So this summer, we will really be in the community, meeting families, working with students. We'll still be implementing our pilot program. And so just really engaging in the community, learning, that sort of thing. And then we'll also, of course, be working on our facilities plan. So we have identified a facility, so we'll be negotiating that lease and then moving to the renovation of that space. The facility has beautiful classrooms. Most of what's prominent for us in our facility space is we want to make sure safety and security. We also are just considering movement of bodies in the space. So accessibility, and then also with our space, we want to make sure that when students come in, they feel warm and excited and it's inviting, so there will be some cosmetic renovations as well. So we'll move through that, and that's where we're starting. And then our applications will actually open up, I think it's on this last. Our applications for families will open up the end of this fall, so the end of August, and they will go to February. What happens is with public charter schools is that should we receive more than 125 applications, because we do have 125 seats available, we'll do a lottery. And so that lottery would happen in February. And so the lottery basically identifies who will be our founding families, those first 125 families, and then everyone else would then be on a wait list. So that will open up in February, and then we intend to have our ribbon cutting and open the school in the fall of 2022. So I am going to briefly speak about finance, and then I'll begin to wrap up because I think that's my time. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we are recipients of the Charter School Program Grant. So that is $900,000 that would be granted to us should we receive an approval. Those funds are not normally available to Charles County and to families and students in Charles County because we do not currently have a charter school in the district. So this is, it's an exciting program to receive that grant through Maryland State Department of Education. We've also received grant funding from national education innovation organizations like 4.0 Schools. That was a micro grant to test our program. Camelback Ventures is a program that we're currently in an application process with. That's another national program. They offer capital, coaching, as well as connections and networking. And then we're also fundraising, so we can have our capital fundraising happening concurrently with our charter school program grant. And then our key expenses, again, our budget is at the end, at the back of our charter application, so you can certainly look through our budget. But our key expenses there will be professional development, our capital expenses, and then wages. And this is the facility that we're currently looking at. If you're familiar with where the University of Maryland Global Campus and CSM, they were located in the Hamilton building that's off of Old Washington Road. They are no longer there, and that space is available. So that's where we're currently courting the Hamilton building. And that's my presentation. So thank you so much for your time today. I'm happy to answer questions, hear your feedback, and everything else. Thank you.
Thank you so much for excellent presentation. And at this time, I will ask my fellow board members if they have any questions. Mr. Lucas.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. I lost part of the mic right there. So, thank you very much for your presentation, and not only for what you showed us today, but for what you provided all the board members. It was, I'll admit, I didn't read all 900 pages, but I read quite a bit, and you certainly did your homework, and it was, it was easy to follow, and just a lot of information. I do have a couple of questions, and you touched on it a little bit again, but the application process. So up until you reach that limit, it's first come, first serve?
Yes,
as long
that's
as they
correct.
meet the I'll say qualifications, or I mean, there's some vetting process to who applies, or how does that work?
So public charter schools in Maryland cannot do an audition or turn students away if up until that limit. So all students and families who are interested in coming to Phoenix International School of the Arts, they are welcome to apply and be enrolled should we have seats available. What we intend to do to ensure that families understand the commitment once they come to the school is really just be in communication with families even before, we want to start building that relationship with families even before they apply, so that they understand what our curriculum entails. They understand that students will be engaging in the creative process and in the arts daily, that there will be a focus on international education and exposure. So in short, to answer your question, there is no vetting process in that sense, but we do want to be sure that we're comprehensive when we engage with families about our school model.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And you touched on something else. So, so special populations. What happens if a student applies and you said you're all ready to go start hiring people, and just parenthetically, good luck with that for every school system and every school. But if there's that student that by law you have to provide a service to, I guess then you would consult with people here at the board to make sure that if that student needs certain services, that student will receive them?
That's correct. And additionally, in our year one staffing model, we will have a special education coordinator as well as an inclusion coordinator. Sorry, that was my time to make sure that I stuck to the time. So we will, our special education and an inclusion coordinator. Our inclusion coordinator is someone that ensures that those students that are special needs or require certain therapies, that they have access to whole group instruction. So that's what the focus of our inclusion coordinator. But our special education and inclusion coordinator will be in contact with the liaison here at the district to ensure that those students receive all of the services that they are required to receive.
All right, perfect, thank you. And the final thing, with anything especially when you start and you're serving a small population, there's a certain amount of cost that goes into that, and maybe the cost per student is a little higher when you're first starting, and that's true for anything. So I'm very encouraged that you have this grant that lined up, and if it's appropriate, I'd like to ask Dr. Hill too. You know, we certainly don't want to negatively impact anything that would happen financially in terms of the rest of CCPS. So in your view, Dr. Hill, there's, you know, what they presented in terms of cost, and, you know, we have to educate students no matter where they go. The fact that they have this grant and they've got things, you know, in order that we're not going to take away from other things in the system.
That's correct. We'll provide it per student.
Per pupil funding.
For each student or family who chooses to attend the Pasota school. My team, Karen Acton and her team, have looked closely at the budget proposal, have asked some questions, have gotten some good feedback. And as we move through this, I don't have any concerns that developing a charter school like this one would cause any detriment to the funding of the school system.
Okay.
I might
Thanks.
add, I'm hoping that, if I may, I'm hoping that with homeschool students joining the public school system, that we will receive additional per pupil funding, and actually, so that's certainly one of the goals of the charter school. Is to
I like the way you think.
tap
That's
into
good.
that community.
Well, thank you very much. That's all my questions, and it's a very good presentation. Thank you.
Mrs. Battle Lockhart.
Awesome presentation. And thank you for all the great information. And you know I did get to majority of it. A lot of my questions are already answered from your PowerPoint, so that's good. I just wanted to piggyback off of Mike's question. The special population, is there a certain percentage of those seats that are gonna go to special population, or it doesn't really matter?
So just based on our research and looking at how schools, the percentage at current schools in the district, we're projecting about 50% of our seats will include students in that special population. And this includes students that will be at Promise as well.
Okay. I really like hearing about the crew. That sounds really
It's part of that. The crew is, it's sort of, if you're familiar with restorative practices, they're circles. It's similar to the circles from restorative practices.
Yeah, but I like the part that this is going to be after school as well. That's a key component that's really important. So thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I do. Well, first of all, I want to say congratulations on the awarding of the grant.
Thank you.
To get you started, that's great. And thank you for the great presentation this evening, as well as the very comprehensive application. I did go through it all.
Thank you so much.
So I think this is a really exciting opportunity for the students of Charles County. So as a former educator, I just have I would like for you, I was looking at page 136 where it has a typical, what the day looks like.
Yes.
Just explain it a little bit more to me. I just want to get an idea of what a typical school day might look like for one of our students.
Certainly. So let me just share a disclaimer. Our school day has changed than what is in that application, just based on conversations that we had with the operations team and really just transportation and making sure our transportation is set. So, but generally, a student would come into the school and they would start with their crew, and they would spend about 45 minutes with their crew. The morning part of the day is dedicated to their academic classes, and so it's going to be sort of like a block schedule in that they'll have like an A day and a B day. So they'll have their A day, for example, academic classes. In the morning time, there will be lunch, and then they will prepare for their afternoon arts classes. And so they typically will have about 2.5, 3 hours of arts classes a day. And then they'll end the day with their crew, which will be about 30 to 45 minutes. And in that time, they'll have homework time or some type of academic intervention time.
Great. Good. Thank you very much. That's all I had.
Mrs. Brown?
Actually, that's what my question was.
And I can just add to that, thinking on the aspect for the teachers, We intend for our teachers to have planning time every day, for our core academic teachers to have planning time every day. So while students are engaging in their arts classes in the afternoon, our academic teachers will have time to do planning. And then throughout our calendar year matches Charles County Public Schools, what we projected will be for the 2022-2023 school year moving forward. So in terms of the number of planning days, those are they all align with the negotiated agreements, and they all align with what Charles County Public Schools currently has set for number of planning days in the month and that sort of thing.
Sounds good. Mr. Hurd.
Firstly, I just wanted to thank you for the presentation. It really was comprehensive, and I know the board has spoken highly of it throughout this entire session here. But as the student member of the board, I have the privilege of often providing that student perspective on things. And I just wanted to highlight some points that really stuck out to me as a student with your presentation. And those points were, first, having a holistic approach with over 90 years of worldwide experience, specifically the worldview greater than just their community. That is something that, as a student advocate and student leader, I've personally been looking into in our own curriculum at Charles County Public Schools. So to see that you guys have done your homework and gone ahead with not just your basic academic curriculum, but ensuring that these students are prepared for a worldview greater than Charles County is just phenomenal, and I think it's beyond expectations. The third component is arts integration. We hear a lot about fine arts, performing arts, arts in general at the board, and at McDonough High School, we've been renovating that for a fine arts and performing arts center. So to see this school take that view and that emphasis on arts, especially when our county has so much emphasis on CTE, it really is a pleasure as a student to have a front row seat to what this county is going to be seeing if this proposal is approved. The fourth point was, and it stuck out to me, was ensuring that the Cambridge International curriculum fulfills the requirements designated by MSDE. And in my eyes, that shows that you all aren't just moving forward on your own path. You have the right answer. You understand that you have to be within the bounds of the way the system is currently run and is as provided for by MSDE. Fifth, $900,000 in additional funds in grants being brought into our school system. And Mr. Lucas already talked and inquired into the finances on this. But I'm having a Miss Wilson moment here. I know Miss Wilson often looks at the camera and tells the community, you need to note this down. $900,000. I mean, that is phenomenal. We would be so privileged and so lucky to have this come into our community and give our education new life and new blood. So thank you for your presentation, and I just wanted to provide that student perspective. It is absolutely a pleasure, and if this proposal is approved, me and the 27,000 students of Charles County are going to have the immense pleasure of having a front row seat to the excellent work you all are going to conduct. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hurd. Thank you so much for that affirmation, and I look forward to, our team looks forward to collaborating with your board and your team as well. Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Mr. Hancock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions. I just want to say thank you for the presentation. It's very thorough, and it's exciting, and it's something that I'm excited about. I firmly believe that when you let a child have the opportunity to choose what they want to learn, you really get the maximum effort out of that child, and it'll reciprocate onto their grades and how they show themselves in the classroom. I'm excited about this personally, and I think you guys did a phenomenal job presenting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock.
Anyone else?
I'd like to thank you for this presentation. It was really awesome, and I can't wait until your school opens.
Thank you,
Mr. Lucas?
So are we looking for a motion at this time?
Well, I was waiting for final comments. I had a final comment
Okay,
before I
sorry.
bring the vote. First of all, thank you for all of your energy. I'm motivated just by listening by you, and so that the public has an idea, it is a pretty intense lay down, and we could most certainly ask you tons of questions. If this board was to approve this charter, of course, there's some charter that has to be outlined, and I hope that I'm not jumping too far ahead, but one question that I would just like to, so that the public can hear the response, is on page 88, you've indicated by 2025, 8th grade math scores are going to be higher than the county and state average. What would you share with the public that you're going to do to achieve that goal?
Certainly. So one of the key components that we've already spoken about is that project-based learning. And so ensuring that students, like Mr. Hancock said, has some type of agency into how they learn and to be able to apply even mathematical skills and components and content to their everyday lives will certainly, one, draw in that engagement. So that's one thing that we want to be sure that students are engaged in math. In the state of Maryland, and in our county, our math scores tend to be the lower scores. And so that's one. Two, in our theory of action, if you will, is that we believe in addition to that high quality curriculum is the professional development. So ensuring that our teachers have access to the latest trends in teaching math and teaching mathematics, and that they feel supported by the school leaders and the district will ensure that they are able to really provide the latest curriculum, latest teaching models to their students. And so with great teaching, in addition to a high quality curriculum, I believe that will equal to accelerating student achievement. So those are the two primary components that we will engage, as well as just ensuring that during the crew time, students have the interventions that they need. So we will look at if there needs to be tutoring that we need to, math tutoring specifically, that we need to implement school-wide. So we have the flexibility as a public charter school to be able to really assess the student need and to implement best practice for our students and for our learning community. Okay.
So for clarification, so that the public knows, your employees are essentially employees of Charles County Public Schools.
Yes.
Could someone walk us through that process? Or am I not allowed to ask that question?
While Mr. Schwartz is coming up, I can say that yes, our teachers have to be certificated. So for those core academic subjects. So I think that provides a sense of accountability and just knowing that there's expertise at the school for our core academic teachers.
And my question was generated because in your proposal, you have a talent management team. So I'm assuming that this talent management team is going to be working with our human resource. Is that clear? Is that correct?
Yes, so that's correct.
Okay.
And you see why we're excited to work with Ms. Jackson, because she has all the answers here. And what she said was accurate. So the employees of the charter school would be Charles County Public School employees. They would be covered by the same negotiated agreements. They would have the same salary benefit scale as all other employees. They'd be subject to the negotiated agreement concerning hours worked, et cetera. And anything that Ms. Jackson and her team think need to be changed or relaxed in those agreements, she would have to come back to not only the board, but also the unions and request some sort of negotiation, three-way negotiations with all of us. But by law, all employees are our employees, which means that we, and I'm looking at Ms. Majors, would be hiring them And as with any of our public schools, we typically don't try to force employees on any of our schools. We have the principal of the school be involved in who's staffing their own school, as this charter school would be as well. So we would be working very closely with Ms. Jackson to not only attract people to come to work for Charles County, but also internal applicants to figure out who would be best suited to work at her school. And that would be, again, something we'd be working very closely with her on.
Thank you. And I knew the answer to the question, but I wanted the information to be made available to the public so that they understand kind of what is entailed. Is there any other questions? Hearing none. Mr. Lucas?
Ms. Wilson, I motion that the board approve the charter school application on behalf of the Phoenix International School of the Arts with the provisions outlined by the superintendent in the letter that she provided to the board, which is posted on board docs.
Second.
Motion has been made by Mr. Lucas, second by Mrs. Brown. Any discussion? Mrs. Val Lockhart?
I just want to make this publicly known, unfortunately, because I didn't personally do it last time. I, unfortunately, because of my awesome relationship with Miss Angelica in the nonprofit sector, I have to recuse myself from the vote, but she's a partner for a reason, so I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. Any other further discussion?
Ms. Wilson, if I could just make one comment, I'm sorry to interrupt. I wanted to be very clear that the motion that the board is making is contingent, as Dr. Hill mentioned, on a successful negotiation with for a charter with Ms. Jackson and her group. That's going to be a process that we'll undergo pretty quickly, and we would be doing that completion of that process in the next several weeks. So I just want to make it clear to the board that as we get into the details of the charter with Ms. Jackson, we want to make sure that she understands that the board's approval is contingent on successfully negotiating that agreement.
Great. And that's in what Dr. Hill outlined to the board members, yes. Okay.
All in favor? Raise your hand. I have Mr. Hancock, Mrs. Brown, Mrs. McGraw, Ms. Abel, and Mr. Lucas. Ms. Wilson, and student affirms. Motion carries. Congratulations. Any closing comments?
Yes. Well, I do want to say thank you so much for just taking a critical eye and looking at our charter application. It was a lot of work, and I'm so grateful to my team that's here, our board, family, and friends, to the co-founder, Rickay King. This is an exciting opportunity for students and for the public, for you all to know that we are designing the school together for our families, for our kids, and we envision the best possible future for them. So I thank you for making that possible for our community.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very well done. Go celebrate now. Cheers.
So our next topic of discussion is collaboration with the Charles County delegation. Who would like to start the discussion? Mr. Lucas.
Thank you, Chairman Wilson. I'll kick it off. And I know that, we've talked about this for some time, and recent happenings in Annapolis notwithstanding, I think this is a good opportunity to discuss how we can have better dialogue with our delegation for things that pertain to Charles County Public Schools, so that we can have a better school system. And I think we all agree that that's a good thing. So I made a few notes, and we have our breakfast each year, and maybe we should look at revising how we do that, because we spend a fair amount of time just talking about things in the school system as opposed to talking about things that we would like to see discussed, if anything. So taking that point in time and working backwards, so we need to establish a time, well, we're going to have the breakfast, and work backwards from that. When do we have to complete our work for any type of bill that we would like to see put forth, or comment on any bill that we think might be put forth, because maybe it was put forth this year and didn't make it, and it might be put forth again. So there's some work to do on our part, and then have that all ready so we can deliver it at the breakfast. Post it on our website, and then also email it to all the committee chairs in Annapolis on both the House and the Senate side. So those are just some talking items. Now, we as a board or individually, we certainly can't control what our delegation does, but we can certainly take a more active role in delivering things to them. And then there's also, and this year, certainly with COVID, it was, towards the end it was easier, but once you learn to navigate the system, to follow those bills and to see when they're introduced. So, if we're not made aware of them by the delegation, then it's our responsibility to follow them. So that would mean, we assign that to a board member, or we work with staff and have someone look at that, just so we're not, caught off guard by things. But I think having a timeline and working backwards so that we can deliver something at the breakfast, and it's not just a half hour of talking about things in the school system that we might talk about during board meetings, but really focused on legislation. I think that would be a better use of our time. So I'll be quiet, let other people talk.
Ms. Abel?
I'm not quite sure what difference you're proposing here, because we do have a set of legislative issues that we vote on every year that we take to the breakfast.
So yeah, that's a question. So those aren't really our issues, I would say, for the most part. Those are MABE issues so for instance, what happened this year, okay, and not that we would have necessarily brought it up about the issue about how school board members were elected. But if there are things that we in Charles County, okay, those are county issues. What we vote on typically are just MABE issues.
No, they're ours.
I understand that, but we never discuss them. I mean, let's be honest about that. We don't really talk about that until we meet at the breakfast, but we don't really talk about that in any other time, and they're given to us by staff, which is fine. I mean, it's like other things. But if there are things that we, like I say, we can't control what our delegates are going to do, but if there are certain things that we want to have done specifically, then we need to deliver that. And to your point, we don't really talk about those things at the breakfast. We said, hey, here, they're in a packet, read them. So I think if we're going to have the breakfast, we should talk about those things at the breakfast rather than some of the things that we typically talk about at the breakfast.
So they're presented to us as an information item, a report item, and then an action item every year. Yeah. And I agree, we do need to be more proactive and discuss those in more details when they come up. But they are passed by us, and they are put before us. And shame on us if we don't discuss it enough or add to it any of our concerns.
No, I'm not disagreeing at all. But none of those correct me if I'm wrong, none of those items were generated by any of us. Okay, I mean, you can say they were because we voted on them, but it's not that we thought that there was something that had to be changed or considered by the delegation.
Not this year, but in the past, because I personally helped write some of
Sure.
those that are on there, and they've been carried over year after year. So we have potential to add to them.
No,
So when they come up, I guess I agree with you, we do need to be more proactive and discuss them in more detail. And to your other point about assigning a board member to watch legislation, I thought you were on the legislation committee.
I am, and I pass everything on to that I can to
Right.
everybody. But there's hundreds of bills, and
So do we need more than one person on the legislation committee to help watch?
it's whatever the board wants to do. I'm just
Ms. Brown is on the committee as well.
Oh, okay.
yeah. So
I'm sorry, Ms. Brown.
That's okay, that's all right.
it's whatever the will of the board is. But I mean, you've been at the breakfasts, and I appreciate your comments about board positions, but we don't talk about those at the breakfast. We just don't.
Mrs. Battle Lockhart? Go ahead. I'll come back to you.
I think it goes back to the comment that I made some board meetings ago, is if we take advantage of some of the work sessions, I think, to be able to address those before the legislation. So then there's conversations before we go to the meeting. I think if that would be helpful.
Okay. Mr. Hancock?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm in agreement. I'm in agreement with Mr. Lucas. I believe. I think what he's saying is, or the way I interpret it anyway, is the last two breakfasts we've had, it gets out of hand. It's gotten out of hand for whatever reasons. Both breakfasts have had two very good presentations presented by staff. I believe the first one 2 years ago was on the Fresh Start, and then this past year we had the SRO presentation. The problem that has happened in the last 2 years is that leads to a dialogue to where we can't even talk about legislation because it just gets a little out of hand. I think and what I agree with Mr. Lucas on is, the breakfast, it's in December, correct? I think it's December. Session starts less than a month after that. And December is never that far away. We're halfway, 6-7 months from now. So I agree that, that's our starting point. Work back from there. How do we prepare for that? The idea of the presentations that we put forth for the delegation is to showcase our system. So it's a great thing. Unfortunately, in the last couple of years, it has not done what we would like it to do at a legislative breakfast. I'm not saying that we don't showcase what we're doing in the school system, but I do think we need to focus more on legislation, things that we know were proposed this year that didn't pass, that we can anticipate will happen next year. And on their end, they got to be more open with us as well. And we need to find that partnership. We're all elected from the members of the same county. We're all here to work for the same members of the same county. We need our representatives to know, and we need to know, and I need to know, and I'm going to talk to myself. We need to work together, and egos and politics needs to be put aside for the greater good of this county. If we can all do that, then we can move forward. And that's going to take everyone's going to take all 7 of us. It's going to take our county commissioners, our state representatives doing that collectively. And just speaking publicly, I know I'm ready to do that. And I hope that we all can do that. Thank you.
Ms. Brown?
I like the idea of having the legislative breakfast, and I think we need to showcase what the system is doing that's going well. But before the legislative breakfast, I would like to have just a legislative meeting with the delegates, because by then they know what they are going to propose. We know maybe what we would like to see happen too. So I think that would be a good way of us collaborating if we meet before the legislative breakfast and just talk about legislation that's going to be proposed where we can all work collaboratively.
Mrs. Battle Lockhart?
And I would just like to remind everybody, I will speak on Miss Patterson has come the last couple of times and have asked us for, to come to her with any things that we consider as it relates to at those legislative breakfasts. I had an opportunity to attend NAACP, is it the delegation forum last week? And to get a better understanding, and they explained the voting rights a little bit more clearer, and it was brought to the attention to everybody that was there is that the major issue with the district piece is there was not necessarily, because obviously Mike represents District 4, but there was no minority representation for District 4. So me attending that forum brought some clarity to understanding, because that was the question that some of you all had, is why they keep saying we don't have representation in District 4. But there's no minority district representation in District 4. So now the way they're structuring things with the hopes that there'll be representation through each district. So I just wanted to share that piece with you all.
Mrs. McGraw?
Well, but thank you for sharing that, Mrs. Battle Lockhart. But it begs the question to me, then why wasn't that shared with us? Because I think Mr. Hancock at the last meeting said all we wanted to know was what was the rationale behind those proposed changes. And I think if that was already discussed or on the plate back in December, that could have been brought forth to give us a heads up that these are some of the things that we're going to propose and here's why. And I think there would be more acceptance on our part. But to support what some of my board members have said, Mr. Schwartz brings forth legislation to us, and once again, we have the opportunity to ask questions and discuss on what we want to support and what we don't want to support. So I do think we have some time for input on the legislation. I like the idea that Mrs. Brown brought forth about having a meeting beforehand at a less formal meeting than a legislative breakfast, because I think that is a time when we do need to showcase what's going on in our school system, because we want our legislators to know the kinds of things that we are doing and to support those kinds of things. But, I just feel as though there has not been an open communication. Would love to have more of it. I would like to say that publicly that when Bill 1060 dropped, I did contact Delegate Patterson, and she was more than gracious to talk with me at length about the bill. I wish we had had that conversation ahead of time. But as a result of several conversations by board members as well as our EACC representative, some amendments were made to that bill that were more acceptable for me anyway. So I think moving forward, one of the biggest things I like to take away is a more frequent positive collaboration, one in which we don't end up in an adversarial conversation by the end of the session.
Anyone else? I think this is a start. I think most of us recognize that there needs to be, as Mrs. McGraw has alluded to, a more positive and collaborative exchange. I like Mr. Lucas's idea of backing up the timeline so that our elected officials are not rushed going into session. I will say publicly that I wish the delegation, if they were so concerned about an issue like modifying the makeup of the school board, that if they would have been more inclusive of all of the citizens of Charles County. They seem to, in my view, cater to a handful of folks, and that type of discussion and the seriousness and the responsibility, it warrant more public debate and more discussion. I think a 10-man, and specifically I'm obviously talking about House Bill 1060, I think it's an overkill. I believe that we should have representation throughout our community, but a 10-man board is excessive. And we're going to go through some learning spurts that could be even expensive had we been at the table at the very beginning. And I think we all are in consensus that we want a better relationship before they put forth a bill that's only taking a small temperature of a small section of the community. The school system affects the entire community. And so there are a lot of bills that were proposed that didn't get through that we're going to have to go back and take a look at, because if the idea has been brought up before, it's probably going to be attempted again. And again, as alluded to, we want a positive, collaborative exchange, not an adversarial one. But I feel, especially the last legislative breakfast, that we were not included. It was, they showed up, they made their pitch that they're going to change something, and I want to make sure going forward that we're open-minded and that we're willing to listen to everybody's perspective. And so I think we have some homework ahead of us. Are there any other questions or concerns? Mr. Hancock?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to add a couple things. You know, this being cordial and respectful, as we all should be, we can certainly control that on our end, but on our end alone. And in the last two breakfasts, I do feel that, you know, we did hold up our end of that bargain. I honestly believe that. But, you know, it is what it is. It's time to move forward. And I also think when we host a meeting, we need to have full control over it if it's our meeting, and not let it get to a situation where we walk away with nothing productive coming out of it. And, you know, to nobody's fault, that has happened, and now we have to find ways to prevent that. Thank you.
Mr. Lucas?
Just one more thing, you know, with regard to, and I agree with you, and with House Bill 1060 and the corresponding Senate bill, and you talk about being cordial, the way that you were treated when you gave your testimony, I think was less than cordial by the chair of that committee.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas.
And that really disturbed me. So I guess maybe the problem stems from where certain people sit. Thank you.
If I may add, so that folks have the context of the situation, I spoke before the Senate subcommittee, and the general rule is, if it's a local bill, there's a tendency for the subcommittee, if proposed by a local state senator, they tend to go ahead with the bill. And they pretty much had already made up their mind, because obviously our representative was there to advocate. Unfortunately, the problem is, because we're virtual, he only got to hear 2 minutes or 3 minutes that is allotted, And I would have much preferred to have had an hour with State Senator Ellis to have a healthy, robust, collaborative conversation. And that never took place. And then so when I went up to, didn't go up to Annapolis, but to speak virtually before the subcommittee on this, it was a bit alarming. And keep in mind, we had a county commissioner, we had the EACC, and then of course me representing the board saying, hey, we don't think this bill is a good thing. And it was pretty much, it was clear that they were not listening. And again, it's worth repeating, this is a bill of such a significance, the public should have been afforded more opportunity, because even to this day, I get asked, why are we changing to a 10-person board? And we're having to hear the snippets after the fact of why this bill was initiated. That's not democratic. That's not serving the greater good of the public. And as mentioned before, because we weren't consulted on these details, we still probably have got to re-wicker how this is going to be executed, not unless there is a public push to modify this bill before it takes place. But I will let the public know that I think we represent all kids regardless of what district we live in. It shouldn't matter what district we live in. We represent all of the kids. And yes, a great portion of our population is now living in Waldorf. That doesn't mean because I live in Port Tobacco that I care any less for the students. So I'm concerned that I want to reinforce to the public, this does not go into effect unless it is modified. I'm hoping that it will be until 2022. But in the meantime, we're here to support all students, no matter where you live, and no matter where we live. And I don't want them to think that because you don't have 2 representatives from District 4 that you're not being representative. That is far, far from the truth, because I know that all of us are committed to our students. So, Mr. Lucas?
Thank you for that. And again, to tag on to that, there's no homogeneous district in the county, and so to follow on to what you say, all of us represent all the kids in the school system, and there are you can point to hundreds of people that are elected that don't look like the people in their district, and they are elected year after year, and so obviously the people in that district think that person is doing a good job at the local and national level. So I think the same should hold true for here in Charles County. The growing of the board, I mean, you can go back 20 years or whenever, and you can look at the pictures on the wall, and there used to be a 5-member board. So now we're 7. Should it grow? Maybe yes, maybe no. But to your point, just to ask us, not in great detail, but just to ask us would have been a courtesy, I think, that should have been afforded. So, thank you.
Mr. Hancock?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I don't mean to to turn this into something that it shouldn't be, but on the topic of that House bill that completely transforms our board, I still cannot fathom why, as myself, a proponent of district, I'm for district elections. I think at-large elections do a disservice to districts. And in this county, we have districts for some reason. We may as well not, because our commissioners are all elected at large. There was a bill in Annapolis to similarly structure our county government the way that we are now going to be structured. The bill was good enough for us to be completely transformed, but not good enough for our county commissioners. I do not understand that. I do not see the fairness in that. We have to be elected by our district now. Our county I live in District 1. districts 2, 3, and 4 all vote for my county commissioner. And I can vote for the commissioners in districts 2, 3, and 4. That's not fair to anybody who lives in districts 2, 3, and 4. That aggravates me to no end. You know, there was a bill that passed the House, and I believe certain members of our delegation on the House side actually supported the bill that would similarly structure the county commissioners' elections the way that ours are now going to be. But it was killed in the Senate side. And I just cannot fathom how in one county the election of one board is completely different than the election of another board. It's sad what certain agendas can do. It's pretty daggone sad. Thank you.
Well said, sir.
Hearing none, next on our agenda is memorandum of understanding with the Charles County Sheriff's Office.
Good evening, board members. I've asked Mr. Jason Stoddart, Director of School Safety and Security, to join me in, first of all, providing a very brief presentation to you and to the public regarding MOUs, memorandums of understanding in general, what they are and what they are not. And then we are available to answer any questions that you have regarding the specific MOU that we have with the Sheriff's Office. So Mr. Stoddart, if you wouldn't mind, thank you for putting together this presentation. If you'll walk us through it.
Thank you, Dr. Hill, Madam Chair, elected board members. Just as a brief, to kind of level set our conversation about what memorandum of understanding are, this is about a 7-slide presentation just to kind of give you a general idea of how we use government, or how government and how we, as the Charles County Public Schools, uses memorandums. Shelley, go ahead. So what a memorandum of understanding is, it's a business agreement that we use on a day-to-day basis for the operation of government organizations. You will see here in a little bit, we have memorandum of understandings across the board on a great spectrum of, with a great spectrum of partners and stakeholders that we operate with on a regular basis. They are best practices in defining partnerships and general understandings between parties. They set forth the program goals and context, and this is where we get into exactly why we have a memorandum of understanding with the Charles County Sheriff's Office. We're establishing program goals and context to what that program means. They outline how the programs are going to operate. They delineate some roles and responsibilities, and the last two are probably the most important two topics on this slide. They are living documents. We do renegotiate them on a regular basis and review them often. And they are considered to be living documents. They are not a one-and-done issue. You will see the history of our current memorandum of understanding with the Sheriff's Office, that this document has been, that a memorandum of understanding with the Sheriff's Office has been in place for a number of years. And lastly, and this is the most complex and complicated part, when we have these discussions and negotiations to sign memorandum of understandings, they have to be compliant with all of the laws that apply in those certain situations. You see a few that are listed up there: HIPAA, FERPA, Title IX, as well as state laws, including COMAR. And we all know that there are huge overlaps, as you guys have talked about with your legislation discussion. There are huge overlaps between those things, and at all costs, we have to make sure that our documents comply with all those and intersect at any given time. Next slide, please.
These are some examples of entities that we currently hold or have held memorandums of understanding with, specific to specific programs, specific to partnerships that are ongoing. And I can tell you, I signed one yesterday with a literacy council. So this is something that, as a matter of doing business in an organization this size, that we regularly become involved with. I would guess, if I had to guess right now, that we probably are currently involved in between 20 and 30 memorandums of understanding. Go ahead, Ms. Mackey.
So the thing that I think we need to make sure that we all understand as we have this conversation about the MOU that we have with the Charles County Sheriff's Office is what an MOU, the limitations of it are. This does not, an MOU does not limit or circumvent the legal authority and responsibilities granted to the organizations through other means. And I think we have to keep that in mind as we move forward with this, that we are still bound by laws. And so is the Charles County Sheriff's Office. We have our laws, they have their laws. The point of an MOU negotiation and discussion is to figure out that context of how those things are going to intersect and how we can do the best for the communities that we serve. The next thing is it doesn't, as we talked about, it doesn't circumvent criminal laws or civil laws, and they are not necessarily legally binding agreements. If you reviewed our MOU, you will see the last page talks about the indemnification clauses. It also talks about the fact that either party can withdraw within 30 days notice and things such as that. Next slide. So a little history on the MOU with the Charles County Sheriff's Office. The first MOU was signed in the early 2000s, which is when the SRO program first initiated at Thomas Stone High School. It was updated in 2012. This was updated as a result of a change in the election for sheriff and who became the sheriff. And many times in the past, when these documents were updated, they were updated based upon who the elected official was. And it was basically a copy and paste. I'm going to sign my name now, and that's needed for a legal document and for a legal agreement. The latest update that we have is signed on April 19th of 2019. That's the 22-page document, I believe, that you have in front of you. I'm sorry, the 14-page document that you have in front of you. When I was hired here in April of 2018, and one of the first things that we began to do was to go through this process of updating our MOU. The approach that we took at this point was to create an all hazards MOU, and not just an MOU that was specific to the SRO program. If you review our current memorandum of understanding that we have, it goes everywhere from the SRO program all the way to graduations to what critical events will be used, how critical events will be planned, and things such as that. We wanted to make sure that our memorandum of understanding was as holistic as absolutely possible. It took us about 6 months to negotiate this between our organizations, and it is just that. It's a negotiation. These were the pie-in-the-sky ideas. Throw the ideas at the whiteboard and then have discussions about how you can make these happen and if they could. And then Mr. Schwartz and Mr. Jerome Spencer, the attorneys at the Sheriff's Office, and our attorney get together and say, does this fit inside the legal confines of the laws that are associated with our organizations? You will notice that this bill culminates as a process in 2018, the Safe to Learn Act, which was passed in 2018, which was a direct response to the school shooting in St. Mary's County, required and changed the foundation of what SROs do. It also put some training mandates in there and some other things. So it was a great time to relook at the MOU that we had. We had some amazing discussions with the Sheriff's Office to ensure that we included all those things that were required in the law, but also that we went even further than that. One thing that I will notice that I am very proud of, or that I will point to that I'm very proud of, is our MOU is seen as a best practice throughout the state, and as well as it's been shared nationally. Recently, I had an organization in Colorado that contacted me to discuss our MOU, what our MOU looked like, and the institution of our MOU, and how they could take what we've done here and use it as a framework and a foundation to build their own MOU. And that all-hazard approach is what sets us apart from so many other organizations. It's not just pigeonholed to be about the SROs. It is constantly evaluated, and we do update it as needed. I will note that as we've all paid attention again with legislation, law enforcement there was some major changes to the way law enforcement does their business in this session. That will matriculate through the system, and that will affect the way that our MOU has to be reworked. But just one of those things that I would point out would be the body cameras, the institution of body cameras, which are now required by 2025 in the state of Maryland for all law enforcement officers. With that said, we do not currently have body cameras in Charles County, so we don't have a memorandum. It's not included in our MOU. As the Sheriff's Office builds that program, we will then have to participate in building what that program looks like inside of our schools, but keeping in mind that FERPA also plays a role in that, and how that will integrate with the body-worn cameras by our school resource officers, the distribution of the video and things like that. And if you just think about that one topic of body-worn cameras inside of our schools, the complexity that brings to this. Our current video camera systems are not, they're not audio, body cameras are. There's all kinds of issues that go with that. Now, we will not be the first organization that has body cameras or that has to walk through this process. There are plenty of people that have built this before us, but we will have to bring it and put it into our culture as the Charles County Public Schools, as well as the Charles County Sheriff's Office. So this is a living document. There are more things that I'm sure that one of the things that I could point out that we did not put into this document that I wish we would have and that we'll discuss again is there's nothing mentioned about the victims of crime inside of our schools in our current MOU. And I think that's highly important that we establish how we will handle what services will provide, the Sheriff's Office is available to provide for crime victims from inside of our schools. There are several others that have been mentioned tonight, and with that, I'll end and turn it back over to Dr. Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Stoddard. I think it's also important to note that this document is not secret. It's something that's been posted on our website for almost 2 years. And I know suddenly there is a lot of conversation about this document, but the allegation that this was done in secret, I think, is unfair. I think it's also important to point out that the majority of our community is very much in favor of the School Resource Officer program. The survey that was done by the school district had 5,600 or so respondents, with 88% of them saying that they thought the SRO program was either extremely important or important. And I think it's important also to point out that among those 5,000 some respondents, 20% or so were students. And so our students are very engaged, and we appreciate that. And they are led by very vocal and very engaged student liaisons and student member of the board. But full 20% of the respondents were students, and still we have 88% of the folks saying we are in favor of school resource officer programs. So we have also heard from the community, as you all heard in public forum today and in previous public forums, there are concerns about the school resource officer program. So we stand ready to meet with members of our community and listen to those concerns and make tweaks to the program as we need to, but we need to be able to have that dialogue, and we need to be able to understand specifically what those concerns are so that we can react to them. But again, I'm going to go back to where I started, and that is that to run a school district, we need to be able to enter into these sorts of agreements, and we will continue to do so on behalf of the school system.
I guess you're
We are
ready for
finished.
questions? Mr. Hancock?
Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair. Not so much a question, but as you touched on, Mr. Stoddard, as you opened up of what a MOU is, a memorandum of understanding. It's an agreement between two organizations. So I think there's a lot of people that expect us, since we have heard and we are listening to the concerns about the SRO program, and many of them are very valid. As Mr. Rozier stated earlier, the number one role, and I totally agree, is to keep students and faculty members, everyone in the school, safe. Maybe, perhaps there should be more of a focus on that. I think you hit it right on the head. But we can't change anything. This is an agreement between us and the Sheriff's Department. We can't alone change this. So we can't, we hear our community. We can go, or our staff can go with the Sheriff's Department staff and make amendments and create possibly a new MOU. But I'm not, I as I stated at our last meeting, they need to have a seat at the table as well. For anything, I mean, this is an agreement between two organizations. They may tell us something just flat out can't be done. And I do think, as I stated last meeting, perhaps a meeting needs to be had prior to even reconstructing a new MOU, just to talk it out and see what could happen. But thank you.
Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hancock. I would like to point out, because it has been a repeated concern, on page 3 of the document that you have in front of you, it does delineate the roles and responsibilities, and the first one does say to enforce the laws and first and foremost. However, what I would like to point out is on page 2 and at the top of page 3, which delineate the mission of the school resource officer as well as the goals of the school resource officer program. The word arrest or charge is not mentioned once in either one of those paragraphs. The mission of the school resource officer program is, and I'm not going to read it to you, but you will see it delineates exactly the reduction and prevention of school-related violence and crime committed by juveniles. It is about reduction. It's not about enforcement. It also further states, as you walk yourself through that paragraph, talks about the creation of trusted channels of communication, the creation of being a positive role model, the empowerment of students, the empowerment of staff to understand what the laws are, to consult with parents concerning problems. All things that our school resource officers do that revolve around a relationship building and environment building and sustaining safe environments within inside of our schools. I'll also point out to you the second page on page 3, where it talks about the goals of the school resource officer program. Again, the reduction, the establishment of rapport with not only students, but also with the parents, the faculty, the staff, and other adults in our community. While there seems to be a lot of discussion about the first duty, I think that if we're going to talk about the duty of what it talks about in there, and we can reword that, and I think it's worth being reworded. However, I also think that we have to have a holistic approach to this, and we can't just point out single things to talk about when the first 2 paragraphs that talk about the mission and the goals of the SRO program are very specific and say nothing about the enforcement of laws.
Mrs. Battle-Lockhart?
Glad you brought the mission up. I had some questions in regards, and I don't think this is not a MOU issue. This is a wording and how we enforce it and apply it and execute it in our schools. As I read the mission, as it talks about the goal and objectives to design to develop and enhance the rapport between the youth, police officers, administrators, and parents. I personally, as you guys know, always there, I am a parent in the school system, been in the school system for a while. And a leader of an organization. I have had a young girl in my organization that has been through the whole situation that wasn't so great with the SRO. My daughter has been questioned without being asked if she could be questioned. So the piece where when I read this, it sounds great, but when we do it on a daily basis and it happens, it's inconsistent. So that's what the challenge is how can we bring the words to life and really do what we said we're going to do within the mission to ensure that the community knows that we're moving in a safe way instead of just automatically wanting to arrest the kid. Because the young lady that was in my organization, she got handcuffed. But it goes back to what Zion said on the screen. The young lady in my organization, her parents had just went through a divorce, and she's going through a lot. She's overwhelmed, and she don't know how to handle it, so her behavior reflects that. But nobody sat her down to have that conversation with her to see what she was going through first. They just automatically, because she's misbehaving, we have to dig to the root of the issue instead of us slapping handcuffs on people. So I'm speaking from my personal knowledge and understanding of what has happened in my experience. So when I read this, it sounds great. But when I hear it and I see it in action, that's not what's happening. The parents aren't involved. That's why I circle parents. The parents haven't been involved in the process. In some cases, not everywhere, just let's be clear. That's where the inconsistency lies, is the parents aren't involved in the process. And if the program is truly successful, when do we highlight the successes of the program? I'm big on measuring the success of the program. So do we have, because we hear a lot about what's wrong with the program, but the presentation had 2 particular situations, but we need to have that come to the table here at the board publicly so you can highlight the successes of the program. That I haven't seen that happen since I've been here, and I just wanted to address that. And school discipline is listed in here as well. I know that based off the wording, that our SROs are not enforcing school discipline, but how do we have these conversations and be clear that we are following that piece first before we go to the next level of the SRO piece and arresting our kids and, you know, having real incidents? And then what incidents are the school system responsible for, and what incidents are defined that you give to a SRO? These are the things that are not clear here, which is something that we need to understand, because it's just saying to enforce the law, but we have to be specific when we're dealing with kids as it relates to incidents, like what incidents falls on the SRO, what incidents don't. So I just wanted to kind of put some of those. I have lots of other questions. I'm sorry, my computer broke down, so I didn't get to send it.
So
yeah.
allow them to catch up with what you just put out there, because you put.
That was a lot, Ms. Battle-Lockhart. I'm going to start with some of them, because I so much agree with you in that we need to highlight the positive things that that school resource officers have provided to our district over 20-some years of partnership. And you know, when we sit and Ms. Kiesling and others have done presentations highlighting all the positive things, we get accused of only telling the good things when, you know, we tell the stories. And I understand the incidents you're describing, the incident the young lady today described in public forum, but for those incidents, from an experienced school-based administrator at high school, three different high schools, there were just as many positive incidents, positive interactions, where a school resource officer could step in and counsel a student, counsel their parents, counsel staff members who were having issues with law enforcement issues and had questions, and they could successfully resolve all of that. But those aren't the stories that we hear in the public. We hear, honestly, similar stories over and over again, where it sounds like it's a rehashing of cases that happened years ago. And am I questioning that they happened? No, I'm not questioning that at all. But what I am saying is there are very, very positive outcomes from the school resource officer program that I think it's easy to overlook. And, you know, agree 100%, Ms. Battle-Lockhart, that mental health issues are the cause of most, I would go as far to say 99% of behavior issues in our schools. 99%. Children don't come to school wanting to act out. They don't get on the bus saying, I am going to pluck that teacher's last nerve today. They just don't do that. But they're children, and they come to school and they're reacting to something internal or something that happened at home or something that happened the day before, and they're upset and they don't know how else to respond. Now the issue becomes when we are talking about a school of several hundred children and you have one child who has a mental health issue, step one is often just getting that child under control so then we can have those conversations. Do I think control automatically means handcuffs? Of course not. Of course not. But I also have to consider the safety of everyone else in that building. And, you know, I would hope with Zion and any other child who has been handcuffed that those handcuffs come off and the conversations begin. And that's kind of where we are there. Help me pick up with a lot of
I think
Ms. Battle-Lockhart's questions.
A couple things that I do want to point out. You know, the stories that have been told are heartbreaking. I was a school resource officer for 3 years at Lackey High School from 2003 to 2006. The times have changed. Context has changed. The way that we do school, the way that we police schools has changed over the years, and it continues to evolve and it continues to get better. And that's what this conversation is about. As we look at illustrating positive things that the sheriff's office does, we do those all the time. It's just when things are bad, we're human. Those are the things that we hear a lot. When things need addressing, that's when we hear the bad things. I'll point out to you, we showed a video at the last when we had this discussion before of a case in which Officer Jaffe's doing at Davis Middle School, where he's handing out challenge coins, and the importance that that the staff there illustrated that he is doing for that school. We can do a much better job, or we always can improve in many different ways, and we can do a much better job of telling those success stories. We have an amazing communication teams, and so does the sheriff's office. Just off the top of my head, we have an amazing corps of school resource officers, but Officer Payne at Thomas Stone, there, over and over and over again, you hear about the things that he's doing with those kids. He was highlighted in that in the video as well. Officer Verts, who took over after Officer Mann when the young lady talked about at St. Charles when Officer Mann untimely death occurred, and now is at another school. Officer Anderson at McDonough, and some of the things that they're doing there. We hear about those things, but we push that. We expect to hear the positive a lot. And talking about, I think that we need to bring some context to the idea that we are arresting kids every day. We're not. We're not arresting or putting handcuffs on kids or anything else. As a matter of fact, I also believe, and I have reached out to at least one of the advocates that spoke this evening, because I think it's important that we lead the conversation and that we bring people together. And I've also handed Mr. Rozier my card. I want to have that, and we as a school system should engage in that and be the ones that are leading that process. I think it's important that we talk about, and as we reported to MSDE, and let me see if I can find this real quick, the amount of arrests that we had last school year, and this is what we reported to MSDE, there was 149 arrests last school year. In 1920, I should reframe that, one physical arrest in which a child was taken out of school in handcuffs. That's what the stats show us. The idea that the police are responding to children's homes after they've been suspended for 5 days and taking kids out of schools is frankly illegal and not true. It's not true. That's not how this works. There are 3 tiers of the criminal justice system, the first tier being the police, the second tier being prosecution, and the third tier being corrections. And then as we talk about juvenile justice, we need to talk about the Juvenile Services Administration. The Charles County Public Schools is an amazing part. It sits on a number of different committees as we work to reform the juvenile services section and what that looks like in the state. I meet every other week with Julie Walton from the College of Southern Maryland, and how we can expand restorative practices not only inside of school but outside of school. The Charles County Sheriff's Office provided us some data that's never talked about very much. 2/3 of arrests over the last 3 years have occurred outside of school of juveniles, not inside of schools. When you're talking about 149 arrests over 180 days of school and 28,000 students, those numbers are low. They can be lower, and we're working every day to make them lower. But I get back to the idea that we're not arresting kids every day for criminal behavior. One of the things that I asked today that we are working on, that I will supply the board through Dr. Hill, is it says in what we reported to the MSDE that there were 65 juveniles that were charged with fighting in 1920. One of the questions that I've asked, that I will continue to ask, is how many kids do we have that were referred for fighting that weren't charged? Because I think that's an important figure. That's one of the figures that we can have, that I asked for late. It's my fault. I'll take the heat for that. That I asked for late, because we need to have that information, because we're not arresting. We do not have a blanket arrest policy for fighting inside of our schools. Are there going to be these situations, as that young lady spoke about, that are heart-wrenching? Absolutely they are. And can they be avoided? Absolutely. They can be avoided at every level, not just from our school resource officers, but also from our administrative teams and from our teachers that are on the ground every day. And we have a responsibility to our children to give them more training, which we will and we continue to do. One of the other things that you asked about was school discipline and establishment of bright lines. There's an ongoing national debate right now about putting into place in hard writing and MOUs what charges the police can make and what they can't. Here's the danger in that. Last year, the last school year, we had a fight inside of one of our high schools that included 14 students that was involved in a fight. Do we write a bright line rule inside of a memorandum of understanding that covers no assault charges will ever be placed with inside of a school system? I think that's a mistake, because we know when we work as an experienced retired law enforcement officer, and with our school administrators, experienced administrators, that bright lines inside of schools are very difficult to follow. And everything has a story. And we need to have that ability to be able to work, and we need to provide that ability to our law enforcement officers that, quite frankly, with the testimony of 149 arrests in the last full school year, is pretty amazing. So those were some of your questions. I think I got them all.
Can I ask a clarification question that this pops up? And this is the importance of having an open discussion, because a lot of times in the public, they're bringing up these old cases and we're not able to see the whole picture. But in some instances, we have a situation where a parent is demanding that a child is charged. So there are circumstances out there that are occurring. It's not that the police officer purposely, can you talk to that a little bit as far as that it's not strictly on the sheriff's department. There are other, this infamous story about this air freshener, that's out there. There's the other side of the story, because just as we don't want our kids to be targeted, we also have parents out there that want to feel that they're safe in school. So we have to tell the whole story, provide both sides of the story, and find a balance. Because we are not targeting kids for arrest.
Absolutely not targeting kids for arrest. We work with our principals and vice principals regularly to train them on when they need an SRO to step in and when they don't. What is school discipline versus what is criminal activity or dangerous activity in a school building? The place where we sit is firmly between telling the whole story and reacting to the story that is out there. We can't tell the whole story. These are children and these are families, and their story is their private business. So oftentimes we sit where we're sitting now, defending some story that someone heard about X, Y, or Z. And it's difficult for us to go into specifics or cite specific cases, particularly when those cases are several years old, as you mentioned, Ms. Wilson, and the times have changed in how we are handling school discipline, and also just the respect of an individual's privacy. Children make mistakes, and it's not fair for us to blast that mistake all over the community and have everyone know what happened. Kids are kids, and we would not do that to any of our kids. So we often are having to say, this is all we can say.
I also think that it's important that the public understands in Charles County as it sits today, and this is something that's currently being worked on, when it comes to juveniles that are involved in criminal behavior, there is no outlet for parents to charge or request criminal charges through the Department of Juvenile Services. Unlike when there's adults involved, where if the police either refuse or don't get involved in a criminal event, an adult can go to the district court commissioner and file for charges. There is no way to do that for juveniles. All charging documents have to come through the police officers that work in Charles County. The way the Charles County Sheriff's Office is set up, if you have an assignment, an area of responsibility, which our school resource officers do, you handle that usually from dusk to dawn. It's not like it turns off. So if there's an altercation that happens at the school, a parent calls in later on after the school has dealt with it, and this happens quite often, where we've had a situation where two children have been involved in a physical altercation. Those two students, maybe they have gotten consequences as a result of a school system. There's been consequences that have been given. The police decided that they were not going to get involved. There was going to be no criminal charges. When the kids got home and they told their story to their parents, the parents decide that they're going to that they want the other child charged, usually because it was self-defense or something along those lines. When they make that request to the Charles County Sheriff's Office, if there's probable cause there to believe that a crime's been committed, they will file those charges because that's the only outlet that they have. Now, in many cases, what we see is one parent charges one child, we turn around and the other parent charges the other child. And what ends up happening is at that point, we have a document that now says that a school resource officer charges two students, when in fact that's not at all what happened. What happened was they filled out the paperwork, but the parents were the ones that pushed the charges. One of the things that's come out of the discussion, and to go back to one of the questions that you had, Madam Lockhart, was the discussion about school infractions and when does school discipline become criminal or the other way around. And I think this is where we get into this discussion. If we have two children that are fighting, that is, by definition of the law, an assault. It's also an affray. It's also a disruption of school activities. There's a lot of things that are there. So the police may be involved initially during that investigation, but once they determine what's actually happened and walk through that, in most cases, I will go as far to say a vast majority of cases, especially as it comes from fighting, our police officers, our SROs back off of that and it becomes a school issue. However, if we have a situation when the child gets home and the child's parents want them to be charged, now we're back in this situation. The next thing to understand about the way that the juvenile justice system or the juvenile services system works is they get then most charges that are short of a felony or someone getting like and even not even all felonies, but they go into an intake. We've heard repeatedly, one of the things that's been discussed is about appealing decisions, our SROs appealing decisions and things like that. That is a policy decision that is at the sheriff's office level that has nothing to do with us. Further, I did talk to the sheriff's office today, and they are in the process of rewriting what that policy is and how they're going to handle that because times are evolving. That is a Charles County Sheriff's Office thing that they have to deal with as far as what they appeal and what they do not. Once it goes to an informal usually it's an informal hearing at the school at the Department of Juvenile Services. The Department of Juvenile Services is built on services. It is not built on confinement. It is built to provide services and mediation and restorative practices and things such as that. We work with some amazing partners there as well. Charmaine Young-Wadi is an intimate partner with them as well from our, I don't know her direct title. So she works with them all the time. Now, I believe, and do not quote me for this, but I believe Mr. Covington, the state's attorney, in one of our recent meetings said less than 1% of all juvenile cases end up in circuit court, which is where juvenile cases must be heard in the state of Maryland. Less than 1% of those cases. And the SRO nor the school system is the one that raises them to those levels. Once the charges are done, all of that comes through the prosecutorial portion of the criminal justice system. It doesn't come from us. And it doesn't come from the sheriff's office. That has to come through the state's attorney's office. So if it ends up in circuit court, that is because the Charles County state's attorney has moved that case from out of intake, or it's now become a formal intake, and moved it to circuit court. There are currently, back years ago, there was a number of boot camp style systems and confinements for juveniles and things like that throughout throughout the state of Maryland. We had one here in Charles County, which is where the Southern Maryland Police Academy exists right now. It was an old boot camp many, many years ago. Those programs have been shut down. They've been shut down for years, decades. There is one current confinement location, which is Cheltenham, and the only way children are confined to Cheltenham is through the Department of Juvenile Services. They are not confined by the police, by law enforcement. They are confined at order of either the courts or the Charles County or the Department of Juvenile Services. So I hope that answers your question, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Lucas?
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. I had a list of questions that I sent. I'll get to those in a second. I mean, they're pretty straightforward, but I want to try to tag on to some things. In the MOU, Section 10, talks about recreational youth programs. You talk about positive things that the SROs do. And, I stopped by some of those camps, and they're doing that. I'm sure, they love working with kids, but, they would probably like to do other things in the summer too, but they're there with their kids. And these are kids, most of which, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Stoddard, but they're identified as at-risk kids. So try to get them in some youth programs. And you brought up the statistic about cases going to circuit court. Though it's not a part of this, we have the teen court program, and I know the SROs are involved with the teen court program. And for those of you who don't know about that, that is a program so that kids aren't formally charged, and they are judged by a jury of their peers, and it's officiated by local people, and that is a great program so that kids don't have a criminal record, but they're learning and having to pay some consequences of their actions, right? And the whole point of this is not to be punitive, but to change behaviors so that kids don't repeat them. And, we hear all these numbers, and people talk about a school-to-prison pipeline, and I'm a data guy, and no one has shown me any data specific to Charles County that statement holds any water. And if it did, I'd be the first one to jump all over it. But, and we heard from the one lady this evening, and she said 87% of the arrests were children of color, but they make up only 55% of the population. But I believe she said the same thing last time, but those arrests are countywide, I believe. They're not just in the school system. And you can get me that, or get us that date if you could. I think those are countywide, not in the school system. So that would be good to know, because obviously the SROs are only, their dealings are just within the purview of the school. But well, question I had, would there be a time when you said only one person was taken away in handcuffs in
1920? In 1920, our report to the MSDE said that there was 149 arrests inside of the Charles County Public Schools. And according to the document that we have, that there were paper arrests, which are commonly referred to as juvenile offense reports, which are signed documents where the custody is turned over to the parent. 148 of those were done, which is what we would prefer it to be, 149 out of 149. However, one was a physical arrest in which a young man or young lady, which I do not know, was led out of school in handcuffs for a criminal offense.
So were those arrests the result of an action that happened at school?
Yes.
All of them were happened at school. Okay, those were at school. So it wasn't though they were being arrested for something that happened outside of school. Okay,
correct.
So that is a good piece of data to have.
And to further the discussion, and we do talk about disproportionality, and disproportionality is a topic that needs to be discussed as it relates to the criminal justice system in general. However, that discussion is rooted upon a conversation that occurred years ago based upon police interactions, voluntary police interactions, proactive police interactions, in which the police were going out on traffic stops, or what they used to call Terry stops, stop and frisks and things like that. Inside of a school, we're not doing that. Inside of a school, our school resource officers are responding to things that occur inside of the school. One of the things that I will point out to you is while 65 students were charged criminally with fighting inside of school, 24 more were charged for threats. This says, hold on, for attacking a student. So out of the 149, we are now up to 89, which are physical assaults. And I'm sure if I sat here and gone through this even more, we talk about other things that have occurred. The officers are responding to what's given to them. They're not out doing locker searches by random, walking through the parking lots with dogs, searching cars and doing things like that. They are responding to events that occur within inside of a school. And that also plays an important role as we look at statistics and we look at comparison data and making sure that we're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges.
Another question, the young lady that spoke, and certainly I empathize with her situation. She's having a lot of problems, but in your days as a police officer, if someone presents themselves to you as wanting to do harm to themselves, is there a protocol that you have to follow at that point?
There is. And I think that we have to keep in mind, no one ever wants to see anybody, especially a child, suffering from a mental health crisis put in handcuffs. The use of handcuffs is designed to ensure that there is no additional physical violence, either towards the police officer or by the student towards themselves or anybody else.
So that action wasn't a choice, and it wasn't anything related to that.
It is
to
not.
Being an SRO. So, I mean, that's just another piece of information.
And it is important to note, mental health people that are suffering from mental health crises, it's a crisis. It is an unpredictable event inside of their life. And yes, police deal with that and argue. We could have that argument all day long of whether they should be an initial responder to that, not only inside of our schools, but also inside of our communities. And that is an ongoing criminal justice reform discussion that will continue to happen and will hopefully get better over the years.
But the training that we've provided our school resource officers over the last 2 years specifically has really helped them to do more of the de-escalation that you've talked about, Ms. Battle-Lockhart, rather than the backing kids into a corner and the recognition of a mental health crisis rather than just a behavioral episode. So we're all working on that, not just with SROs, but with teachers and vice principals and ourselves. The public defender who spoke during public forum earlier brought up, as Mr. Lucas shared, the disparity and the disproportionality with Black and brown children, and that's a problem across the country. And it's a problem across the state, and it's a problem in Charles County. But we have worked very hard to change those paradigms and to address those problems. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. Do we still have work to do? Of course we do. But that is not just here. And as Mr. Stoddard said, our SROs are not proactively looking for trouble. They are reacting to situations that occur when you have upwards of 1,000 kids in a building and you need to ensure safety. Mr.
So
Lucas?
if I could, I had those questions that I sent, and half of them been answered, but I just want to point out a couple things. So on page 4, section 1.6, and again, one of the people that gave public comment tonight talked about, officers administering discipline. Well, it clearly states in section 1.6, school discipline, and everybody can read that for themselves. And the enforcement of CCPS student rules and students' discipline will be the responsibility of the principal and administration at each school. And however, the SRO will not enforce the school's rules and regulations. So that's in the MOU, and that's one of the things that, even though the legislation didn't pass in Annapolis this year, that they were talking about. And here, it's already in the MOU that we established. So, let me see. On section 1.8, so it talks about having access to school records on students. So, my question there was, what and when can they get access? And this is the SROs. I assume that's only if I'll say a case has been opened, if that's the right, or if they're investigating the case. But that's, when I read that, people worry about confidentiality and how much access anyone should have to their personal information. But I don't know if sir, you can comment on that.
I'll point you from section 1.8 back to section 14.7, which talks about FERPA compliance.
Okay.
And our school resource officers do have limited access, and I'll repeat that again, limited access to Synergy. It does not include grades and things such as that, and it is only for their schools. So it is personal information, or what's referred to as PII, name and emergency contact information. So it's basically their contact information that they have access to. That is as a result of their need to know and as they're doing their jobs. There may be a case, and we've had this conversation at the state, and in some school systems, school resource officers see every IAP and every 504, and they sign off on them. I'm not sure where that lies in, just to make sure that they're aware in these other school systems. I'm not sure under current law and rule how that applies today, and I think it's worth a discussion. In one of my recent discussions that I had with one of the advocates, she brought up a very good point and was very articulate about our school resource officers understanding what IEPs are and what 504s are, and we're having children that have been identified as having needing some additional supports, and how important it is for them to have that information. But we can only give that information if it's allowed, and those are conversations that we'll have with Mr. Schwartz and also with the state to find out how much information they can have. Our school resource officers at times are also involved in our SST programs and our threat assessments, depending on the situation. So they're going to have access to some information and need access to some information because they're going to hear it as they sit around those tables and have those conversations when it's appropriate.
Typically, they're invited into those conversations. They're not inserting themselves into the conversation.
And they also don't have
Invited
access
in by
to...
whom?
The administrative team.
Okay.
Depending on the situation. It's not a carte blanche, you can come in anytime you want. It depends on the situation. And not every situation, and as a matter of fact, very few situations involve them being involved in SST or threat assessments. We have some amazing school psychologists and school counselors that are involved in that.
Last question. Section 3.2. Special police officers. So besides Mr. Stoddard.
That's it.
Okay.
So to give you some, because this has been a portion of the discussion, and I understand what the one advocate mentioned, is she mentioned in her discussion of 13.2, which is a specific discussion about the special police officers that are inside of our schools. And there is an ongoing paradigm discussion about the use of special police officers, the use of security personnel inside of schools. It is worth a discussion. There are other school systems that are close by that have that. However, the one thing that I will point to you is those would be our employees. And I find it difficult as I'm reviewing other locations that are utilizing either private security, because we routinely get requests from private security industries that want to come into our schools and provide us security services, or special police officers or security personnel that they are more trained than what our police officers are. Police officers, just as a general understanding, every SRO not only has to graduate a police academy, which is upwards over 6 months now, but they also have to complete annual refresher. They also have to complete use of force refreshers. They also have to recertify with all of their the things in their Batman belt. But in addition, they also, if they're school resource officers, have to go through a 40-hour training program. We provide them, when funding is available, we provide them the opportunity to travel to the National School Resource Officers Association conference every year to get additional training. On top of that, the Maryland Center for School Safety, which was created as a result of the 2018 Safe to Learn Act, also provides ongoing professional development. Just as the latest discussion is, school resource officers are now starting next year, are going to get 80 hours of training that I have to go through. Back to your SPO question, I am the only special police officer that the Charles County Public Schools employs. We did that for a couple of different reasons, for the potential for growth if need be, but we don't believe that we need that at this point. It also provides some oversight for me, plus some additional protections. It also provides some boundaries, some legal authority to assist in case of emergency. It also allows for, as you notice, there is no police officer here right now. And if somebody were to come in here and to act out and to act in a criminal way, it would allow me on this property to be able to respond to that event and have some legal protections and some legal authorities in order to do that and to stabilize the situation and to stabilize whatever crisis in a manner that is governed by law. And we have that for me in every one of our school systems now, working with the Maryland State Police, and there was recently some updates to that law that require I have to have 12 hours of professional development training every 3 years, which I'm currently working my way through the Maryland State Police and the Maryland Police Training Commission. There are no others. We have no plans to hire, at this point, to hire any additional special police officers, and that is because we have an amazing relationship and we have 17 amazing school resource officers that work for us.
The other point to think about when we think about the difference between a school resource officer and a school system employed security force is that those 17 school resource officers and their 2 supervising sergeants are funded by the Charles County Sheriff's Office. And if we were to employ our own security force, who in my view would be far less trained, we would have to take the budget hit for all of that. And I'd much rather employ additional counselors, additional teachers, additional school psychologists than a school security force.
Mrs. McGraw?
Okay. I know the focus of this discussion tonight was the memorandum of understanding, first and foremost. Excuse me. And I heard the presentation, and I heard, I don't know who said it, that this was a business agreement between the Charles County Public Schools and the Charles County Sheriff's Department, and that there are many other organizations that we have MOUs with. I also heard you say, Dr. Hill, that this agreement can be amended as needed or reviewed as needed. Right. So would it be fair to say that because we have had a lot of discussion generated from our community members, from our student members, from members of the board, that there are some issues that we may need to consider in reviewing the MOU at this time. I even heard Jason say that there was one particular area where you needed to include, to enforce the law first and foremost, and not to include arrest or charge. So at this time, I heard you also say that you make yourself, you've made yourself available to any member of the community that has concerns to meet with you or to somehow convey them to you. So at this time, could we ask that the MOU be reviewed along with the Sheriff's Department to consider some of the concerns that have been brought forward to us from our community at large, as well as all of us? Is that reasonable?
Great point, yes, and I think it was noted in one of the initial slides. This is a living document. It has changed a lot since the 20 years that it was originally incepted. We are more than willing to listen. Mr. Stoddard has already had quite a long phone conversation with one of the folks who has come to public forum twice now to understand the concerns and to try to adjust the memorandum of understanding so that it reflects that, as long as it still fits the business needs of this organization.
Exactly.
I'm not, as the leader of the organization, ready to just throw it out the window. I do believe that we could do some tweaks that could address the concerns that we've heard, yes.
I'm not suggesting that, but I do feel as though that you are the individual who is in charge of the day-to-day operations, and that you are the one that we entrust to make any changes or any take all this into consideration.
Yes.
And to move forward with it.
Yes.
So that is a document that is one that serves all.
Yes.
Mr. Stoddard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things that I would like to bring up, yes, I have meetings all the time as we discuss these things. And we will not delay moving forward, but I would like, and we have had this, myself and Dr. Hill have had this discussion, to create that open dialogue with many of the people that have come forth about certain specific issues. We need to lay the foundation for statistics that we're going to use and how those statistics come around so that we can have an accurate picture of what we're discussing. What I would also like to do is to create some type, I'm not going to call it a complaint process, however, what I would like to refer to it more as is something along the lines of a review process or something like that to discuss, because one of the questions that I did ask the advocate that I had a conversation with is, as these problems come forth, who are they going to? We've heard these 4 cases that have been referred to over and over and over again for a number of years, and they're all old. And it makes it difficult to find the information to provide a general discussion. But as people come, where does that information go? Look, here's my student was involved with your school resource officer. This happened. This is a great example of what shouldn't happen. Where do those go? Because we need to have that idea, that place where parents can come. I'm not aware of any OCR complaints, the Officer of Civil Rights complaints filed by any of our parents against a school resource officer. I'm not aware of any major complaints that I've heard that when we've sat down and we've had discussions, and this has only happened a handful of times in the 3 years that I've been with the school system, where somebody has called me and said, your school resource officer did this and I want to know why. And by the time we walk through it, we had some resolution. We had that restorative practice. But I don't hear these stories, and I think we need to create some type of a process in which those things are encouraged to come. You mentioned a situation, and while the resolution may not be palatable to everybody, the reasoning behind it and the logic behind it is important. One thing that I would tell you that my experience is 20 plus years as a police officer that I was bad at until later on in my career was just simply explaining why I was taking the actions that I was taking. And especially in the heat of the moment, and especially when people were argumentative, or especially when people were attacking me. And those are things that we can all work on, and that we all should challenge ourselves to work on, is once we spend a couple days chilling out about things and relaxing about things, now let me have a conversation. And I think we need to include that. That needs to be something that we talk about moving forward with this. But I think there's lots of room. But I also, and my point of this is, there is a tremendous amount of changes that have been passed in Annapolis that are going to affect law enforcement in the very near future. One of the things that I would ask is as we begin this internal process of coming to the idea of what we can update in this MOU, please give us and the sheriff's office some time to digest what they've been given in this session, because I don't want to go back again and go back again and go back again, because as you saw, it took 6 months to get to this part. And if we're in constant negotiations, we accomplish nothing. So know that we are going to work on it. We will continue to work on it, but it could be a protracted process just simply because of the timing of it.
Short answer is yes. We can do that. And before we close, I would just like to recognize Sheriff Troy Berry and the work that he has done to allow his team to work with our team to really come up with an agreement that we believe is a very solid agreement. It's not perfect, and of course we can make it better, but Sheriff Berry, on behalf of the school system and as just a community member in Charles County, we should be very proud of the work that he has done, the organization that he leads, and his ability to take care of our community in a way that keeps us all safe. So thank you, Sheriff Berry.
Okay. Mr. Hurd, you have your hand up.
Thank you both for the lengthy presentation. I know it's 8:50 p.m., so obviously this is an important topic that deserves the discussion it received. Before I got into my comments, I wanted to thank Ms. Wilson for putting it on the agenda for today and really tackling this issue head on. The first thing I wanted to point out, and this was included in the presentation, is that this is a living document. And Mr. Stoddard and Dr. Hill both referred to this. And I feel strongly after hearing the feedback from Dr. Hill and Mr. Stoddard that they are actively working to improve this process. I wanted to preface my comments by saying I understand that a memorandum of understanding is Dr. Hill's authority. And I understand it's not the place of this board to approve or nullify any MOU. That's Dr. Hill as the director of the day-to-day operations of the school system. A comment was made that the survey shows that students support the program, the community supports the program. So I wanted to make it abundantly clear that I support the program, but I believe if there was a question on the survey that perhaps would have said, do you think the program should be improved? I think the community would be right in my corner as well, saying yes. And I believe the board is also of the same impression. But I want to continue to impress that this isn't an all or nothing ordeal. And if we treat this conversation, I don't think we have tonight. I think we've done a great job of having this conversation. But if we treat it as, are we keeping the program or removing it, we're doing a disservice to the conversation of improving it. And one example is Mr. Stoddard brought up the review process. And I'm very optimistic to see that already within public forum, which albeit was 3 hours ago, we're already taking notes of the points that were made, the concerns, and taking actionable steps to improve the program. I just wanted to go over a couple things. So one thing said during the presentation was there's just as many positives as negatives, and this has been said at SPOB Advisory Council meetings, I believe the SRO meeting where board members were present, that students feel just one negative encounter can do away with all the good that's done. And if you try to put yourself in the shoes of a student, imagine what would weigh heavier in your mind, seeing a friend or a fellow student in handcuffs or receiving a challenge coin. And I'm not saying this is what the vast majority of students deal with, but when we come to terms with the fact that negative interactions carry more weight, that's just the way the world works. That's what people remember. And I think we've talked a lot tonight about how we want to express the more positive things, but we have to solve these negative issues so that we can embrace the positive. So the first point I wanted to bring up with Section 1 in general was, and I've brought this up previously, would it be possible, and I don't know how the board would feel, for concealed carry firearms? I don't know if this would, no?
I am not a supporter, Mr. Hurd.
Mm-hmm. So I would be interested to hear the feedback genuinely, because I'm by no means an expert.
Of teachers being able to carry firearms in our schools?
No, I am not suggesting that at all. Concealed carry as in police officers. So the feedback I've heard is that some students might be intimidated to approach police officers, or specifically the SRO, or have the SRO approach them with the gun that they carry.
Again, as an aspiring leader inside of our organizations, I would challenge you, and I would challenge all of us to understand that this idea that police officers are bad is something that we hear all the time.
And I'm not implying that.
There are huge and serious officer safety concerns as it results to placing officers in plain clothes inside of a crowded school. There is no such thing as an unarmed police officer. The rhetoric that we hear all the time about an armed police officer, it is a police officer. Police officers are, by law, allowed, and in most cases, to include the state of Maryland, required to carry a firearm. They are trained with that firearm, and we have no position or place. And as you know, the bill in Annapolis that was requiring for police officers to remain outside of the buildings and to remain in plain clothes died on the vine. There does not appear to be any appetite for that. There is always room for improvement of public image by our police officers, and we all play a role in that. It is no different than a parent standing in a grocery store with a police officer who's off duty in uniform standing right behind him saying, if you don't cooperate with me, I'm going to turn you over to that policeman. And that happens every day. And we have an obligation as a society to not demonize every police officer as a result of some that have done bad things. I'm not going to say that there's a tolerance for bad apples, because there's not. However, I will tell you that our SROs are not the officers on the street, and there's a reason. The exact thing that we talk about the police officers being in our communities and having ownership of their responsibilities, their area of responsibility that they have, and building relationships with those communities. If they're doing their job and they're doing the things that we expect from them, there should be no fear whether they're wearing plain clothes or not.
So if I could just clarify, I'm not referring to the uniform of the police officer. I know the weapon is a part of their uniform, but I mean specifically the weapon, just for the weapon to be concealed on their person.
That is a law enforcement decision.
Okay, well, I just wanted to provide that suggestion in further discussions. Like I said, you're the expert, but I do believe that in terms of furthering the goal to build a positive relationship with students, that's an important step for students who might be intimidated by that.
So, Mr. Hurd, that you would feel better knowing that a law enforcement officer had a gun, but that it wasn't showing?
Quite frankly, it's not about what I personally believe.
Okay,
but
well, what you're representing?
What I'm representing, I believe the vast majority of students that this program is seeking to reach out to and benefit, I believe those students would feel more comfortable and be more willing to interact with a police officer. I'm not saying take the gun off of them, but if it isn't physically
A simple question, yes. So
apparent.
If it's not physically seen, but you still know the officer had the weapon.
I am relaying the feedback I've heard from students.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thanks.
The next point I wanted to make, and Mr. Stoddard brought this up, and I agree with him. At the end of the day, it's semantics, but Zion said it, and I wanted to reiterate it. It was something that stuck with me, and I wrote it down, is resources first, officers second. And with the duties and responsibilities of a school resource officer, it says to enforce the law first and foremost, and I know you said that's semantics, that can be changed, but I wanted to put it on the record. I think that's an important part of shifting the purpose, the PR, the image of this program from primarily being law enforcement first and focusing on building those relationships with an officer who happens to be an officer. So potentially in the future, striking first and foremost, also maybe placing greater emphasis on serving as a positive role model and mentor for students. Like I said, I know it's semantics, but I think if we continue to move forward, it trickles down from the top. And if we set these priorities and show, I really do believe that specifically serving as a positive role model and mentor for students needs to be the primary objective. At least.
No one disagrees with you there.
So, all right. So then section 1.6, school discipline. I was wondering if you could provide clarity on when the line is drawn for keeping the peace versus enforcing school rules and regulations. And the context on this is I've heard from several students that at times their administrators will say, do you need me to go get the SRO? Do I need to get the resource officer? And that's clearly with the implication that they're a disciplinary officer. And I know that the behavior they might be referring to could be them not, the officer needs to keep the peace. So I just wanted to know, where's the line drawn? And quite frankly, is there any behavior in schools? What behavior wouldn't be disturbing the peace?
One of the things that we have to continually do is to train our administrators on what our SROs are there for and what they're not there for. One of the things that we started several years ago when I came along under Dr. Hill's leadership was our Safety and Security Symposium, which several of you have attended. And what is usually given, as we all know, the opening of schools is a very busy time. But we are allotted, our office is allotted 8 hours. And one of those major discussions that we've had at every one of those is to our school, having our school resource officers, their supervisors, and their commanders come in to explain exactly what this MOU is and how we are to utilize that. Do we need to do that more? Absolutely, we likely do. Because our school resource officers should not be referred to as a threat, back again to my conversation about in the grocery line. That is akin to exactly what you just described. Drawing bright lines for you as it relates to what is a school discipline issue versus what is a criminal issue is difficult based upon anecdotal, what can we do? What I will tell you is that things such as dress code violations is a great example of something that we want our school resource officers to do nothing with, and they should not do anything with. They have no reason to be involved in dress code violations, kids wearing their hoods or wearing earbuds or things such as that. But when there is a physical altercation and a fray, when we have a child that's out of control, there's going to be, because the act there could become criminal. And does it need to be looked into? Yes, it does. But as I've said, the vast majority of the time it is deferred from and referred from a criminal issue down to something that is considered to be a school discipline violation. So it's again, very difficult, as you know, because you've been in school for 11 years. Everything is evolving quickly inside of a school, and there are no two situations that are the exact same. We've heard the referral many times about a food fight and kids being charged with a food fight. I have not heard of such a thing in the last 2 years, 3 years. It's never just a food fight. If food gets thrown, there's also some type of an altercation that occurs. The context of those discussions, again, need to be had. If there's a food fight in a school, is that a disruption? Yes. Is that something that we want our school resource officers, or even our school resource officers, want to be involved with charging for disruption of school activities, things like that? No, not at all. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Something else you brought up is that I believe you said something along the lines of when money allows or when the budget allows, you send the school resource officers to a national conference.
Yes.
So I believe that as a board, we should prioritize that. I think that's enough of a priority that it shouldn't be when the budget allows or when the money allows. I think we should take steps to make sure that there's always money for our SROs to attend that conference.
Just to add on to that, we funded that through the Maryland Center for School Safety grants. They allot $10 million, which quite frankly are up in the air right now. There are two $10 million pots that we have been a major recipient of over $600,000 each year as we celebrate the availability of grants that allows us to do those things without impacting our everyday budget, that allows us to hire more counselors, that allows us to hire more school psychologists. So again, another legislative issue of keeping that as a priority to where we have those pots. But I agree with you. We will continue to work, and we scrounge for everything that we can do.
I absolutely agree. Section 3.2, so you provided more context with what the SPO is. I know that it's Dr. Hill, giving the final approval on this MOU. Some feedback, I think that it should clarify that Mr. Stoddard, not Mr. Stoddard specifically, but his position as director is the SPO, and the phrase was used, open for growth. I don't think it should be open for growth in the future for these SPOs to be used in the fashion other than it currently is.
To bring some context to that, when we write MOUs, we write them as a broad-based discussion. And if, say, the sheriff's office was to pull out of the agreement for some unknown reason, something bad happens and he pulls out of the agreement, we still have to have a responsibility to be able to move forward. And that's why that's there as well. Plus, they also have to look at trends. As we've seen, evolution throughout the entire country. There are some school systems that are moving to this. There are some school systems that are moving to more of a private, personal, employed security, and that is a model. But currently, that is not what we are looking at.
So then the next question I had, so section 5.2 goes into more detail about the major incidents that might occur. And we've heard multiple instances of individual student interactions. So are those treated as major incidents, or is that they're just responding in another fashion?
So as we look at what Section 5 talks about, it's notifications. Okay? And keep in mind as we read this document, the different sections have different things, so we have to pull them from exactly what this talks about. The major event notifications involving staff and students involves a teacher that is arrested, involves a student that is a homicide victim, involves a student. So we have an agreement in place, and believe me when I tell you this, we're one of the few organizations in the country that has this, to where if one of our students is sadly a victim of a major crime, where we are within the first 5 phone calls that are made, because we have the ability to be able to provide resources, and quite frankly, we have the demand and the duty to provide resources to our students. So as we look at Section 5.2, understand that these are things that could impact our normal everyday operations, so that we need the law enforcement end of this to provide us. This is was a huge negotiating point, because as you know, if you know anything about law enforcement, they are very compartmentalized and siloed, and sharing of information at times can be very troublesome for them. This is a huge win that deals with this. So it is only as it relates to those things.
And I appreciate the context. I think that helps a lot.
Mr. Hurd, for the sake of time, I think if you've got additional questions, I think I've afforded you a reasonable amount of time.
Would you mind if, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
Happy to sit down with Mr. Hurd.
That's what I was going to suggest.
And go through questions and get clarification.
Do you mind if I put some final comments on the record then?
Quickly, please.
All right. So, as they say, my Spark Notes version here. just looking at what some of the speakers said, some follow-ups. Ms. Gross's point about rights and interrogation, and Ms. Battle-Lockhart mentioned it. I believe we need to have a process in place for notification to parents when there's some, I'm not saying interrogation, but just some sort of investigatory actions between an SRO and a student. I think the parents need to be notified. They need to have the opportunity to be a part of that interaction. In terms of Zion's situation that we heard, and I know there's always more to the story, but I believe that it wasn't appropriate for students to see her in handcuffs. Regardless of the discussion on handcuffs, I believe that more importantly, those 10 students or so who saw her, I believe that's a very negative interaction that they weren't even a part of. They just witnessed, and because they witnessed it, now I believe that program isn't going to be able to fulfill its accomplishments for those students. And I believe this is just a generalized rule of thumb that can be applied to everyone. In terms of Ms. Anguisa Chile's points, Mr. Stoddard, you already mentioned this, but the complaint process for parents and students, the general review process, I believe that's important. That needs to be made a priority. And then finally, I would be interested in the points about changing the standard to imminent danger as referred to in COMAR. And I know that's probably a whole long story for another day, but I'm just generally interested in that, and I wanted to put that on the record.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Lucas?
Very quickly, thank you. Can we get the statistics from that school year, 149 arrests? Can we get the demographics of that?
We can send that to you.
That would be great. Okay, I'd just like to compare that with what one of the speakers said. I know it's a different school year.
It is. I think it's it's the latest that we have.
Okay.
That was a full year.
Yes, that was a full school year that was unaffected by COVID.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Hill, if there is nothing else, I believe that completes our work session. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Ms. Abel, second by Mrs. McGraw. All in favor? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.